I call this meeting of the Davenport Community School District Board of Directors to order. Before I get started, I wanted to note that two of our members are not seated at the table. One is Director Mayfield, and he has he's had some personal issues that he's dealing with, and that's why he's not here. And the other one is Director Gosa, and we have determined that it's appropriate to participate by phone, and Director Gosa is participating by phone tonight. I think he's down in Kansas right now, and we think that's a reasonable reason for him to not have to be here personally. We appreciate your attendance at this board meeting. By attending meetings, you can learn about the accomplishments, needs, and concerns we face. The board meets regularly on the first Monday for committee of the whole meetings and the second and fourth Mondays of each month for a regular meeting. Open forum for the public is available only at regular meetings. All meetings are open to the public except closed and exempt sessions, which are permitted by certain sections of Iowa Code. All board decisions, however, are made in public open sessions. The board is not a forum, it is a deliberative body. Accordingly, it receives communications, both oral and written, as a medium of information. It does not debate the contents of such communications, but considers them in making decisions and in the establishment of policies. During each regular board meeting, there is an opportunity to address the board by completing an open forum request and giving it to the board secretary prior to the meeting. Each person may have up to 2 minutes of time to speak. This is a time of listening by the school board, so the board does not make any comments during open forum. The issue will usually be referred to the administration for further study and follow-up if necessary. When the board president recognizes you, direct your comments to the entire board and limit your remarks to 2 minutes unless extra time has been approved by the board president prior to the meeting. The board president will recognize one speaker at a time and will rule out of order other speakers who are not recognized. Only those speakers recognized by the chair will be allowed to speak. Comments by others are out of order. The school board president shall promptly rule out of order any discussion by any person, including school board members, that would violate the provisions of state or federal law, our open forum policy, or the statutory rights of privacy of an individual. To ensure that the board can conduct the important business of the district, the following guidelines apply to all members of the public who attend board meetings. The board asks that all members of the public treat open forum speakers, district employees, and the board with respect. Individuals are not permitted to engage in conduct that interferes with the ability of other individuals to watch the board meetings, interferes with the ability of other members of the public to offer comment to the board, or interferes with the ability of the board to conduct its business. Demonstrations during public comments, such as clapping or cheering in response to either public comments or statements made by board members, is discouraged. Those wishing to display placards, signs, and/or banners may not block any attendee's view of the proceedings. We're going to get started here in just a second. I just want to note for everybody, I'm going to change the order of the agenda, and I am going to move section 6, which is board reports, until after section 7, which is communications. So we'll move on with our board priorities. Director DeSalvo, would you please read those for us?
I'd be happy to. The board priorities are that the Davenport School Board establishes the following priorities to ensure the academic success of all students. Provide leadership and direction to improve the overall learning environment in our classrooms, schools, and district, including the health, safety, and security and happiness of students and staff, and direct and support actions, programs, and activities which reduce the impacts of poverty on our students, their families, and our community.
Thank you. Director Hayes, would you please read our mission and vision statements?
Yes, I'll be happy to. The mission statement is to enhance each student's abilities by providing a quality education enriched by our diverse community. Vision statement is education that challenges conventional thinking, prepares all students to compete in a global society, and inspires our students, parents, staff, and communities to answer the question, what if?
Thank you. We have a couple of public hearings now. I will now conduct a public hearing on the 2018-19 budget amendment. A copy of the amendments to the current 2018-19 budget amendment was published in the Quad City Times on March 28, 2019. Any resident or taxpayer may present objections to or arguments in favor of any part of the proposed amendments. Anyone wishing to speak on this item, please step forward to the microphone, state your name and address for the record. Seeing and hearing none, I now declare the public hearing closed. A vote on this item will take place later in this meeting. I will now conduct a public hearing on the 2019-20 proposed budget. A copy of the detailed 2019-20 proposed budget was published in the Quad City Times on March 28, 2019. Any resident or taxpayer may present objections to or arguments in favor of any part of this proposed budget. Anyone wishing to speak on this item, please step forward to the microphone, state your name and address for the record. Seeing and hearing none, I now declare the public hearing closed. A vote on this item will take place later in this meeting. We'll move on to student board reports.
Go ahead, Brady. You want to get us started?
Central freshman Kyle Hopewell was named first team All-State in boys swimming. Central is encouraging students to create origami sea creatures. For every artwork created, the Bezos Family Foundation will make a $4 donation to programs of ocean conservation and coral reef restoration. Central is competing with North and West in the first annual Recycle Bowl. At the close of the 4-week competition, the school in Davenport that collects the most recyclable material per capita will win. The girls' track and field team competed at Brady Street Stadium last Tuesday on senior night and brought home the team championship trophy for the first time since 2014.
Blood drive will be hosted on Tuesday, the 11th, for any students interested in donating. Our mock trial team has 11 students who have received outstanding awards during the regional competition, and 51 of our 57 vocalists in the annual solo and ensemble state festival received either Division I, which is a superior rating, or Division II, which is an excellent rating.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We'll move on to recognition.
So I'd like to invite Coach Paul Flynn to come up. He's our district athletic director to highlight some programs.
So it's all right. I think. Yep, good. Okay, we have some state champions amongst us today, and I'm going to have them come up. They're not all here. First of all, North had a bowling team that was the state champions. This is the 4th time since the inception of the state bowling tournament that they have been state champs. I think right now we only have 2 members of that group, and I'm going to have them come up here when I call their names, and their parents can come up with if they wish, or they can stand up and be recognized. It makes no matter to me. But the first one is Brant Carter. Brant is a senior. His parents are Darcy and John Carter. and he brought his sister along as well. And the second one is also a senior, and that would be Brian Verdon, son of Lisa and Steve Verdon. I might mention that Brant was the MAC Bowler of the Year, and Brian was the state individual champion. I wanted to call him medalist, but that's golf, so I don't know what they call it in bowling, but great job. There were 4 other members of the team, and I don't think any of them are here, are they? But I will say, I'll mention their names: Matt Hutchison, whose parents are Lori and Jeffrey Hutchison; Cody DePardo, parents Kelly and Anthony DePardo; Owen Steger, parents Chanel and Scott Steger; and Cooper Keinig, parents Jennifer and Chris Keinig. All 4 of those are juniors, and so I think the future looks bright for North High Bowling, at least for another year, and probably beyond that. When you win 4 state titles, that's pretty impressive. And I want to also mention that of all these people that we're going to recognize today, they're all pretty doggone good students too, which is even more important than being a good bowler, although I wish I were, but I'm not. And so congratulations to both of you. Brian? And then we have amongst us 2 individual state wrestling champions, and they are both females, and they are sisters. The first one I'm going to call up is Tatum Park. Tatum, obviously she's not quit wrestling yet because she's still at it. Tatum is a junior. She wrestled for North High School. She's a state champion, and obviously she's getting ready for the next season. This was the initial female state championship. Am I saying that right, Tatum? Close enough? Okay. She was coached by Jake Connor, the wrestling coach at North, and I'm sure she has other coaches too that work with her. I asked her what she likes about wrestling before we came in the room, and she said everything. So anyhow, 1 state champion. You stay right up here because the other one is from Central, and that would be Sydney Park. Tatum's a junior, Sydney's a freshman. Both state champions. I'm not gonna ask your weight that you wrestled at. That's not proper to ask a female that, so I won't do that. Their parents are Jamie and Josh Park, and if you would stand up, please. And they brought grandmother along and a sister as well. And so I think things are looking up for wrestling. You know, one of these 2 can be a 2-time, well, they both can be 2-time state champions next year. And Sydney's got a chance to go beyond that. And I'm sure, knowing what I've heard about these 2, that will be your goal, both of you. So congratulations to both of you. Thank you.
Before you leave tonight, I want you to always remember that when you're a state champion, that when you're the best at whatever you do, nobody can ever take that away from you. And you know what it feels like to be on top, and it didn't happen overnight. I've been in gyms where those 2 girls are kicking the crap out of every boy in the gym. I've watched it, and it's awesome. Your guys' hard work has paid off. And I know our bowling team, that's a program. You're part of a program that wins, but it doesn't happen without your individual effort. And the effort that you put into that, nobody will ever be able to take that away from you, and that's a very powerful thing. You're always going to be a champion no matter what. And I know that all along the way, people in this room have been a champion somewhere, and once you've been that, you know what you're capable of. And so I couldn't be more proud of the individuals and the parents and the grandparents and athletic directors and coaches that helped get people to that point. And I couldn't be more proud of you guys. So thank you for coming here and sharing that. And that trophy will forever be in your high school, and you're a part of that. Don't ever forget it.
All right, thank you very much for all of that. Next, we'll move on to another presentation on PBIS.
We have recently, yeah, that's okay, Sarah. We have recently been recognized, and so I've asked Sara Harris and a team of people to put together just a 15-minute presentation about what's their award, what does it mean. So take it away.
All right. Well,
Please
thank
do
you.
an introduction as well.
Okay. Do I have to push it or can you hear me?
You have to push it.
Okay.
There you go.
Thank you. Well, thank you. We're really excited. Again, my name is Sara Harris, and I'm excited to give the presentation. Do you want to pull it up, Mary, or me? No, you pull it up. I pull it up. Okay. You're in control. That's what they all say. Let's see. There we go. Where's the view? Thank you, everybody, for waiting so patiently. All right. So I'm very excited to be here and celebrate tonight, about positive behavior intervention supports and the celebration that we're sharing. My name is Sara Harris. You want to introduce yourself really quick?
Yeah, good evening. I'm really honored to be here. My name is Therese Jorgenson. I work with the Iowa Department of Education. I'm an education program consultant, and the work that I do for the department is I oversee the prevention of bullying and harassment. I also work with school counselors, and why I'm here tonight, and I'm excited to be here, is that I also work with the state leadership team and PBIS, Positive Behavior Intervention Supports across the state, and we're here tonight to honor the work that Davenport has done.
Thank you. Awesome. So just a little bit about PBIS and then hearing from a couple that are acknowledged. We're looking at a multi-tiered system of approach for social, emotional, behavioral support and the hard work that improves the effectiveness and efficiency of equity in our schools through a multi-tiered system. The schools have been working so hard to help support the success for all students, and we're looking at, when we look at PBIS, customizing and working with students, families, and the community to look like, what does culture and climate feel like in your building, and how can we help support it? So some fun pictures up there. When we say multi-tiered system of support, just a little bit, we're really focusing on the universal core tonight as we celebrate the acknowledgement and Tier 2 supplemental. We are focused on that our buildings have been engaged in trainings and committed to trainings and looking at the school climate, creating expectations for their building-wide so that students can come and know what it's like to be in the building, what those behavioral expectations are, and how social skills are built around that. So there's multiple components through each level that we're celebrating that has the hard work behind it. We are really working at and looking at some of the research behind PBIS, and with that comes a lot of really great things that are up there. Reduction in problem behavior, increased academic performance, increased attendance, and so on. As we look tonight, we're really looking at the collaboration between the Iowa Department of Education and the Mississippi Bend AEA, who have helped collaborate in this strong effort as we look at the framework and training our buildings. And what some of the things we're being acknowledged for tonight are really looking at the stages that we've been through in regards to, we began exploration in 2014 of PBIS. We started talking about what installation would look like in our district, and then began training of our buildings. And as we look at the training of our buildings and the ongoing, because it's ongoing implementation, up here is a wonderful component. The picture that's shown here is student voice. It's imperative to have student feedback, student voice, and collaboration as we work so hard for culture and climate. So the acknowledgement itself, which I'm excited about with the Department of Education, is we're recognizing 11 schools tonight who went through the process of working hard to say, this is what we're doing. We have the evidence of. And so our emerging schools, oops, somebody's calling in. It's that So our, each building that was here, our emerging schools who are being acknowledged really made the dedication to say, we want to be a part of, we are committed to this work. And so a lot of the buildings are here. Those are Fillmore, Adams, Washington, Eisenhower, Madison, Monroe, Williams, West, and Mid-City. And then we have an Honor School Recognition Award, McKinley, an Honors Plus School Award, which is Wilson. And so just to share the difference and then hear the voice and honor the people who are behind this hard work. Emerging School Recognition really says we are committed to going through the training and teaching us, and we are going to implement this. We are making that dedication. And then Honor School Recognition, which is McKinley, they've been doing this outstanding work and committed to it and continue to embrace it within the culture and climate. And Honors Plus, which is Wilson, has been also doing the work and dedicated, and they have the evidence of implementing Tier 2 and containing and continuing to have a positive school culture and climate. So they're the voice. So if it's okay if they stand up and we give them a round of applause real quick. If you're here representing those buildings, can you stand up? They're the ones receiving the awards. Yes, outstanding. Oh, thank you, Rob. That way. Thank you, you guys. And then if we could just hear quickly and have maybe Wilson come up and West come up and share just a little bit about what PBIS is from the building level perspective.
Hello, my name is Shari Larson, and I'm the principal at Wilson Elementary School, and I say that very proudly. Just a couple things. First of all, thank yous to my leadership, past and present. This couldn't be done without the connection from the top to the middle and to the buildings. To my Wilson families and community out on the West End, it's a wonderful place to be. I told them it's like the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. It's just a great place to teach and learn. But mostly I want to thank my staff and my students. They're the ones that apply this every day, and it's hard work. So I want to make sure we honor that. So some positive outcomes. First of all, I want you to understand PBS is the core foundation to ensure all students have access to academics through common building practices and procedures that also go into the classrooms. A second outcome is ultimately we build intrinsic motivation and self-reflection of what it looks like and feels like to be in the school setting. We know we are achieving that by the great, we do not have very many students on Tier 2 and Tier 3 plans because at our core level, this is embedded in what we do. And the last one is monthly all-school rally to celebrate our positive culture and climate. Kids are excited to be at school. They have happy faces, and they want to learn, and they want to be there, and our attendance is high, so we have multiple data points that show us that our core for PBS is working.
Okay, I'm Corey Williams, principal at West High School, and thank you, Shari, for getting your little Falcons ready when they come to us, and for Williams getting those students. Shout out to you, Julie. I know how hard of a job you've had this year and how hard a work it is, especially with these older kids, to get them going with the PBIS. So we just are as goofy as we can get and make it fun for the kids. Very quickly, I want to introduce Mike Orfatelli, the associate principal, who is actually in charge of this team, and I want the team to stand. Deb, Brandy, Angela, Michelle, and Jen. You guys stand up, please.
Jason's the back.
And Jason Guerin, sorry, there's Jason. All right, thank you. Thank you, thank you. These guys work incredibly hard. They meet constantly. They work with Sarah, and with Sarah's support and the district support, it's been a really great thing. So we've got a lot of work to do, but we're on the right path for sure.
Can we still say something? Corey took all 3 minutes. So I'll just say at West, we win, we engage, we're safe, and we teach. Jill Yates is standing over there. I want to make sure that she's recognized, and we thank her. Of course, Sara Harris at our district level. All of the training that she's talked about can't be done without her, nor Jill. So we appreciate the motivation, the examples, all of those different types of things as she comes out to our building and coaches us up and gives us walkthroughs as well. As TJ said, we're building a program with this PBIS, and we're building champions with our students, but first of all, we have the champions here that are our teachers, that are leading the charge every single day using common language and reinforcing everything, even though there may be a naysayer out there, even though there may be something that's blocking their way. our staff are champions in moving this PBIS forward, and we're really appreciating the visit today, and I really appreciate the recognition from the state and the school board, so thank you.
So you heard from the buildings, and I would like to give Therese opportunity to share as well.
Okay, Ralph, if I go too long, just, do one of these. Hey, I'm excited to be here. I did have an opportunity today to tour both McKinley Elementary and West High School, and I was so impressed. Some things that people sometimes forget is that we believe at Davenport Schools and the Iowa Department of Education that we believe all kids can learn at high levels. That's why we come to school. That's why we teach. That's why we're administrators. That's why we're school boards. We want people to do well. But everybody doesn't come to the table with the same expectation. As a building principal, when I was a building principal, sometimes parents would say to me, well, my kid doesn't do this at home. And I said, well, I hope you don't have to walk in a straight line and use inside voices and raise your hand before you speak at the dinner table, because that would just be weird, right? But schools have a different kind of culture. And what PBIS really does, it's not about tickets or rewards. It's really about setting that framework, that system, that all the other good things that you're doing at Davenport could also work into. Things like Oveus, things like Boys Town. PBIS is the framework. And it's just simply as something I think is just so important to remember is that pay attention to the behavior you want to see. Instead of I would say if detention's worked, why are the same kids there, right? We want to do things that are positive, and this is just a perfect framework to make that happen in your district. And so I'm super excited. I was really impressed with the work at elementary. I love the art, how you're embracing the arts. I loved your CTE. I'm also on the council for Future Ready Iowa, and I'm going to recommend some of the people that are involved in Future Ready Iowa to come to West High School to see what's happening there. Phenomenal, really exciting. The other thing that we do through PBIS every year is that we put out just like a survey throughout the state to all the schools and all, everybody who's PBIS throughout the state, AEAs, and we say, let's recommend and let's recognize somebody that would be our PBIS Person of the Year. And this year, it is my great honor and excitement to recommend. I'm going to read a little bit about what people have said, but Sara Harris has been recognized overwhelmingly across the state of Iowa as the PBIS Person of the Year. Are Sarah's family, in case you're wondering. So I just want to read a few comments as Sara stands up here. And Jill, if you want to come up closer, we want to get a good picture because this will be released to the department tomorrow. Things that people have said about Sara, I'm just going to say their names just because I don't know you, but I want to make sure that people are recognized. Troy Lentil said, Sara is enthusiastic with her leadership and guidance while leading many teams through their journey and progress to PBIS implementation. Teresa Becken, principal, said a lot of great things, but she also said she is one of a kind. Nicole Matthews, no one works as hard as Sara Harris. She is truly an amazing advocate for PBIS and MTSS, a behavior intervention at Davenport Community Schools. Shannon Child, when I think of exceptional leadership, support, and guidance in the area of PBIS, one person comes to mind, and that is Sara Harris. I can't look at her because I'll cry. I'm going this way. Molly Oberstein, school counselor. Her positive attitude is infectious and helps promote morale in each of the buildings. She's an integral cog in the Davenport School District's implementation of PBIS. No, stop that. Kimberly Findelli, kind of die. Her enthusiasm for PBIS is contagious, and she makes all of us want to be the best version of ourselves in our classroom for our kids. Julie Heller, Mrs. Harris is passionate about PBIS and what it can do for students and for schools. She is one of the highest qualified PBIS professionals I know and is incredibly knowledgeable when it comes to a system-wide approach. Kristen Huggins, she has worked late nights and weekends to make sure we always have what we need. Andrew Van Spybrook, Sara is the PBIS model in human form. She believes so strongly in her work that she's willing to have difficult conversations with teams, but is with them every step of the way as they work to build a system that works for the building. Ben Gibbs, unrelenting positivity. Alan Hartley, she is the force moving our district to more intentional, caring, and data-driven systems. Laura Gutman, Sarah is an invaluable resource for Davenport. Carrie Beeler, when Sarah comes to our schools, you can be sure she's helping our staff implement PBIS procedures, layers, strategies, and interventions to help our students. Bailey Hines, we now have a clear idea of who we are as a PBIS team and the direction we need to take. This is all due to Sarah. Angie Hass, she is our go-to person whenever we're struggling with ideas on what to do with certain procedures or behaviors we're seeing in the building. And from Therese Jorgenson, I am working with people from all over the state on many different initiatives. And I just have to echo TJ's words when he said, you know, Sara Harris is a champion, but so is Davenport Community Schools. As we work together and move forward, I can see nothing but great things in your future. And it's been a real honor for me to be here tonight. Thank you.
Wow. I couldn't say anything but thank you to the board, the school district, the people who make things happen, the people in the buildings, the principals. And my job is easy because I love it. I'm passionate about it. And I really know that good things happen here. So thank you so much. I'm so surprised. So thank you.
This is Sarah's family, by the way. That's not like the state PBIS team or anything. That's her beautiful family. So, Sarah, thank you for that presentation. Teachers, principals, administrators.
Hey, Sarah.
You know what? Can we go?
Don't be leaving yet.
Can we go? There'd be a good spot right outside in the hallway to gather that picture, unless you wanted to do it in here. Unless you wanted to do it in here.
Oh, you want us in the picture?
Oh, you want the school board in the picture?
Just go right in front. Just go right in front.
Sure.
Have them all stand. That's the easiest way to do it.
Yeah, go.
Yeah, just stand behind the chairs.
Sure.
Do you want us to stand?
Without numbers on it, right?
You guys stand behind your chairs.
Why don't we go in front of the table? Right in front. I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry.
So I think if you wanted to do another picture, I think a good spot would be out there, and you could take all your time to get it all going. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Ralph told me not to go.
What? No, they can wait.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so it'll just take a minute. I do have a comment that I want to make, but before I do, I wanted to open it up to the board. Vice President Hayes.
Not a question or anything, but just want to comment or to compliment you and congratulate you for all you do and the clear turnaround that we're seeing in some of the schools. Kudos to you.
Thank you.
Director DeSalvo.
Just to concur, thank you so much for everything that you do. It's a difficult thing to take on something so big, so extraordinary, and so challenging, and you've been a huge success. So we're very lucky to have you. Our students are lucky to have you. Our staff are lucky to have you. So you are a champion. think that's the word of the night, but truly and sincerely, thank you. You're doing wonderful things, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Director Beck.
And as a parent of a child at McKinley, I've been impressed as I spend time in the classroom being able to see it in action. I wish I did more of it at home, actually, but we really appreciate your work, and I'm impressed with the way you've gotten everyone to buy in and just made this wholesale shift, and it's really great work, and you really deserve this honor, so thank you.
Thank you.
Director Potts.
You know, when you consider what the task was when you started, trying to change 1,500 teachers and principals and schools, to change that and see how far you have come already, it must be so satisfying to know how the changes that you have helped create have changed the lives of so many people. I mean, you deserve 2 bouquets. 3 bouquets.
Thank you, Mr. Potts.
Director Gosa, do you have anything?
No, I do not, other than keep up the great work.
All right. Thank you. And, you know, this was amazing, Sarah. And as all this was happening, of course, I was starting to cry a little bit too. And and that's really cool. But your passion, over the years as I've known you, I thought, man, she's just so cool. And you've always had so much passion and just wanting to do everything in whatever position you've been in. I wanted to thank you for everything, and this is easily well-deserved, of course. So thank you and congratulations for everything.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. I just want to say again that the people in the building and the staff and the principals, they make it really easy because they're phenomenal to work with. So thanks.
All right. Thank you, Sarah. All right. Next is communications. Remember that we're going to reverse 6 and 7. First, Director Potts, would you read our upcoming events?
Yes, sir. April 9, Tuesday, from 5:30 to 8 is the 12th annual Taste of Pro Start event at the Davenport River Center. April 22nd, Monday, 6 p.m. is a regular board meeting in the Jim Hester Boardroom. Tuesday, April 23rd at 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock social hour, 7 o'clock dinner is the retirement dinner for Davenport employees at the Radisson. May 1st, Wednesday, 3:30 is Policy Committee meeting in the Executive Boardroom, Achievement Service Center. May 6th, Monday at 5:30 is the Committee of the Whole meeting in the Jim Hester Boardroom. May 13th, Monday at 6 p.m. is a regular school board meeting in the Jim Hester Boardroom. May 27th, Monday, is a holiday. Schools are closed. May 28th, Tuesday, 6 o'clock, is a regular board meeting in the Jim Hester Boardroom.
Thank you very much. Next is open forum, and we only have one open forum request for tonight. And so I will just say that we really do welcome open forum participants, and this is an opportunity for members of our community to come and talk about what their concerns are about what's going on in the district. So tonight with one, I'm going to go ahead and allow 3 minutes for the presentation. This is from Kerry Dugan. And Kerry, why don't you come on up, give us your name and address, and tell us what you're thinking.
Hi, I'm Kerry Dugan, 630 East Colorado Street in Davenport. And I just want to say we are hearing a lot of joys tonight, and that is something to be really proud of. And I think the word champion is really fitting for the school. We have a lot of champions in our buildings, we have a lot of champions in our students. And when we're talking about champions, we need to remember that part of being a champion is championing for others, for all, actually. We have to remember that while we're making progress, we have to be we have to caution ourselves not to get too excited about things that sound good and really wait and make sure we're doing really what's best for everyone. Last week, several members of the board raised concerns about the lack of support you're receiving from oversight agencies. You seem to be saying that the Iowa State School Board has not given you appropriate direction to make positive change. You may have forgotten, but when the school board and district-wide Davenport went up to Des Moines in November, the Iowa State School Board was very clear on what you needed to do. They told you to come home, engage your community, hold a town hall, and make the special education situation right for all kids. We as a community are still waiting for you to do this. As parents of children impacted by the unlawful administration of our children's education, we have asked the administration to make several changes that would help address the situation. It seems as though the administration is not getting you guys the information you need. So to clarify what we're asking, district-wide Davenport PTO would like a special education parent advisory committee with meaningful involvement for the board so that we have positive interactions and communications. We need to have an IEP advocate network so that we can cut problems off right at that table in an IEP meeting and not let discrimination fester for years. Finally, we need to address the school climate. PBIS in some buildings is amazing. That's great, but we need an education for all. The school climate is what's causing declining enrollment. No one wants to send their kids somewhere where discrimination has been allowed to flourish for decades. You cannot address school climate alone because of the situation, unfortunately. We've grown something where the public does not trust this board, unfortunately, because of things that have happened over the last decade, things that happened over the last year, things that happened at last Wednesday's policy meeting. We need experts in the field to come in and help us rebuild that trust so we can move forward positively. We ask you again to obtain a school climate evaluation with financial analysis from a reputable, independent national education firm. So just to wrap that up, we need a special education parent advisory committee, an IEP advocate network, and a school climate evaluation. These things are still necessary, they're still urgent, and we're watching to see whether or not you actually want positive change. Thank you.
Thank you, Kerry, for your thoughts. We'll move on to board reports. Are there any reports? Director Beck.
Sorry. On Friday of last week, I went and toured Monroe Elementary, and I met Principal Mr. Driscoll and got to see classrooms as they were sort of settling in for the day. I went about 8 a.m. right when school started and stayed for about an hour. And I looked in on kindergarten, 3rd grade, and 5th grade. And I just wanted to say I really appreciated Mr. Driscoll letting me take a look so I could see sort of what it looks like to be in a school that wasn't one of my own children's. And for his transparency, he was really willing to talk to me about how teachers collect data and the kinds of things that they need from us. And I really appreciated his taking the time to walk me around and help me understand how our district works. And it also was a great school. I met some great kids, got to speak with a parent even, and got a lot of positive feedback about their school there. So that was it.
Thank you. Director DeSalvo.
A week ago Sunday, I went to North High School to see their presentation of Mary Poppins, and I'm really sad because Esme Belzer, one of our school board members, student school board members, had the lead. She was Mary Poppins, and it was the coolest thing I've ever seen. Like, they lifted her up in the air, and it was extraordinary. So I was very honored to be able to attend that. We had a finance meeting, our first finance meeting last week. It was TJ, myself, and Claudia. Claudia did a great job. She's laid out a whole calendar for us. Our next meeting will be in April. There's a lot of talk and discussion about budgets and things happening this meeting, but as we progress through, I hope to be able to bring just different topics to the board to help clarify budget information. So we're off to a very good start, so I'm very happy with the progress that we made at our very first meeting. The other thing I would like to provide an update on is for the update of Dr. Kowalski and his coming to Davenport. He is in the process of obtaining his licenseship from the state of Iowa. So every person, teacher, administrator, et cetera, whoever comes to work in Iowa from another state has to go through the process of being certified. So the Iowa Board of Education Examiners has notified Dr. Kowalski that his application for an administrator exchange license requesting recognition of his Wisconsin superintendent certification was determined incomplete in meeting Iowa's requirements. So the Board of Educational Examiners noted that Dr. Kowalski's coursework for his Wisconsin certification was completed through a Wisconsin-approved program, but such program is not regionally accredited, an Iowa requirement. The next step for Dr. Kowalski is to request a waiver from the Board of Educational Examiners, and the district, we will provide additional information as that becomes available. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Hayes?
The board basically wants to send our condolence to the family of Tyrell Nelson, a student from Garfield that passed a couple weeks ago. His services were a week ago today, and I did attend his visitation, so we just want the family to know that we send our deepest condolence to them.
Thank you. Anything else? Director Gosa, do you have anything?
No, I do not.
All right. I have one report. It's a little lengthy for me. It is. Normally, I probably have about 2 sentences. Anyway, recently, one of our board members expressed their opinion about a lack of trust in the administration. And I want to comment on this. All board members have the right to express their opinion about any issues or concerns they have. And I want to make sure that everybody understands that this is an individual opinion of the board member, and it does not represent the opinions or feelings of every board member. And I think sometimes things, they get interpreted that way, that a board member says this and therefore the whole board thinks that. But I do want to say that from my personal perspective, I do have confidence in our administration. And these past several months have been very challenging. They've been very difficult and emotional for everybody, including board members, staff, administration, and the public. The board has plenty of responsibilities, including fiduciary, and the utmost importance this past year has been an absolute urgency and reality to show sustainable and very real progress towards eliminating our negative unspent balance, which is a statutory requirement. The district has met with the SBRC many times over the past few years, and the SBRC have not been satisfied with the progress we were making in developing those sustainable budget cuts and working toward achieving that goal. And there are a lot of things that the administration has done and the board has done that have been working towards that goal, and yet it's difficult and challenging to really explain it in a way that would probably make sense to everybody out here. The SBRC has worked with all of us, with the board and with the district, to try to figure out how to get back on track. And recently, we met with the SBRC, and the SBRC accepted our progress report with the proposed budget that was presented to them which demonstrated progress towards the district achieving the goal of a positive unspent balance by June 30th of 2020. This required some very hard work and hard decisions being made by our interim superintendent, our associate superintendents, and other members of our administration. I think it's critical to remind everybody that the unfortunate reality that we have faced was in November that we became aware that we were required to make a $13 million cut in the next 2 years instead of 5 years, as we and part of the SBRC had thought. And so it's really a big deal. And I'm just trying to express the colossal magnitude of this to all of you out there, because everybody in the administration has worked hard, and it's been excruciating, I think, with the things that they've had to do and working with the unions. There are a lot of very difficult decisions. Over the past several years, the board has chosen not to close any additional schools, which I can understand, but that did not remove the urgency to find the major cuts somewhere else in the budget. And the other most unfortunate reality is the lack of funding and unequal funding from the state. Remember that this is my thinking, not the board's thinking. But I want to say that the amount of expenditure cuts that have been necessary could not be found anywhere else at this point, since the district's primary expenditures is in personnel. Couple this with decreasing enrollment, and I personally saw no other choice, as unfortunate as this is. On a positive note, we do have a consultant, Paul Erickson, who is working free of charge for the district, who will be working with the district, especially to be finding additional efficiencies that can save the district money, but not to the level of cuts that have been required to move successfully toward achieving a positive unspent balance and meeting the district's financial responsibilities and meeting the deadlines that have been set for our district. I always encourage any board member who has suggestions or ideas for additional large-scale budget cuts that will be required over the next 3 years to present them to the interim superintendent and to the board for further consideration. I apologize for the length of this, and I just hope everybody does realize that this board is not monolithic, and we all think differently, we have different ideas, different approaches, but it is absolutely important that every board member have their opportunity to speak. And so these are the two positions that have been presented are simply two individual board members' perspectives on what was the right word? Trust in the administration. I want to say that I personally have trust in the administration. If there are no other board reports, we'll move on to the consent agenda. May I have a motion?
Mr. President,
Director Hayes.
I move the board accept the consent agenda as written.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is this, before we get into the discussion, is this note from Dr. Goldstone on everybody's?
No, that's just for the board,
I understand, but the board has all that information.
if they looked at, if
Okay, and so,
We had it.
and so that additional section is included in the consent agenda. I just want to make sure that that's clear. Is there any discussion? Okay, we'll call for the vote. Director Hayes,
Yes.
Director DeSalvo,
Yes.
Director Gosa,
Yes.
Director Beck,
Yes.
Director Potts.
Yes.
My vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. Is there a motion regarding approval of bills?
Mr. President,
Director DeSalvo.
I move that the board approve the following resolution as recommended by the administration for adoption of the bills for the bill listing periods of March 21st, 2019 through April 3rd, 2019. Resolved, all claims presented to the board having been duly certified as correct by the secretary, reviewed by the administration and board members, and they are hereby audited and allowed as just claims and warrants drawn on the treasury for the several amounts. Further resolved, the payment of claims and salaries be approved as presented for the periods of March 21st, 2019 through April 3rd, 2019.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Okay, we'll call for the vote. Director DeSalvo,
Yes.
Director Hayes,
Yes.
Director Gosa,
Yes.
Director Beck,
Yes.
Director Potts.
Yes.
My vote is yes. Motion carries. We'll move on to the superintendent report.
In your board docs, you'll find a memo that I sent to you earlier, and it's an outline of our administrative reductions. When I say administrative reductions, I want to make sure that that's noted as ASC Central Office / administrative reductions. This is something that we talked about earlier on, and before we get started, I'll have Claudia explain the front half of our memo. And then I'll get into the details of the positions and things like that down below. And then Claudia, you can finish it up. But before we do that, I wanted to clarify the reason why this looks different than the way the teachers were presented is we had to follow contract language, and it required us to put the teachers and it required a board vote. The positions that you see on here are the reductions that we are going to make from central office, ASC, whatever you would like to call that, ASC, and administration. And that what that ranges from are all the way from specialists to administrators to directors to administrative generalists, all the way up and down our staffing tree, so to speak. And we have secretarial positions in this building, and we have custodial positions, and we have everything inside of ASC central office. And so we wanted to give a detailed memo of that. Now, with this, you're not going to see a wholesale vote on these things because the way that our non-bargaining positions, they work differently. They don't require a vote. They require a vote, but not contractually. And so they operate a little differently. Some of these positions you've already voted for. And we did that because we knew we were going to have to meet our number that we told you in November. And so we put a hiring freeze on. And so I will walk through each one of these line items and explain them later. But first, Claudia, if you will please start off with the first part of our memo and give us some background of why we are where we are right now.
Yeah, the top portion of that table is a portion of the bigger plan that you reviewed and approved back in November. We just snipped out the part of it that was directly about the administrative cuts. And each of those departments, each of the administrators of those departments was charged with finding the amount of that amount of cut in their department. Most of those were done by positions that will be reduced, and some of it was some other non-personnel expenditures that either can be reduced or moved out of the general fund. And then TJ had asked me to put together some historical data. In the CAFR, the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, that the auditors presented to you back in January. One of the, and there's a lot of pages in that report, but one of the many pages in there does give a breakdown over a 10-year period of the number of students that we have and the number of staff that we have in different categories of staff. So I tried to summarize that here, and looking back over the last 10 years, we have 855 fewer students. We added 204 teachers and paraeducators. Those are all grouped together in that report as instructional staff. So it's not just teachers. I want to make sure you're clear on that. And then we have other student support staff, which can be counselors, social workers, nurses, behavior strategists, those types of positions that support students but are not directly in instruction. And those positions over the past 10 years increased by 107. And then in the administration category, that includes principals, the superintendent, board secretary, other administrators that are, licensed by the Board of Educational Examiners. And then we also have support services, which includes our clerical staff, crafts and trades, which is going to be, can you scroll back up, Mary?
Oh, sorry.
Thanks. Crafts and trades, which is going to include maintenance workers, custodians, carpenters, electricians, other service workers, and then we also have non-bargaining professional staff. Over that same 10-year period, those positions decreased by 191. We currently have 57 people classified as administrators, while 10 years ago we had 66. So that's just kind of giving you a historical perspective over the last 10 years, both in our student enrollment numbers and in the different categories of staff that we have, to try to give you a broader picture of our overall numbers that we've got there.
Thank you, Claudia. So now, if you scroll down, Mary, I'll go through each one of these tables and kind of explain this. And Claudia, if I mess up, or Bill or Rob, if I mess up on this, please jump in and correct me. So the first department that and these are all departments at central office, ASC, and operations. So I'm going to go right down. You'll notice we wanted to start each one of these columns with reduce or realign, if that makes sense. And there's one department where we add because we've reduced so much at the request of the board. The administrator so we're going to start with the community relations. There's a total of 4 FTE in there. The administrator is going down to a specialist, which we didn't add that number in here because we added it down in the administrator section down below. We reduced an administrative assistant. We reduced the marketing specialist. We reduced the communication specialist. Now, we are going to combine the marketing communication specialist, and we'll be posting that soon. When you look at this money, that's total package. And so that would be the salary, benefits, insurance. So the total reduction there is $115,000 at 45% of the department. Curriculum department, curriculum instruction and assessment, we reduced the data specialist, we reduced the secretary, and we reduced the curriculum specialist by 0.5. That's 11% of that department at $173,000. In the finance office, we reduced the secretary, and we reduced the warehouse manager for a total of $114,000, about $115,000. Now I want to, human resources, we reduced a human resource generalist, and in this is the first realignment that you will see. There are people, one of the things going through this process, we were able to see that it really made us look at all of our resources and what are the appropriate uses of those resources. And so anywhere we could, from teachers all the way up to administrators, we looked for spots where we could realign them. Example being, we added our reading coaches we added more reading coaches into a categorical fund and saved, I think, 4 or 5 jobs there. I think our curriculum department readjusted, and with the union readjusted the TLCS to add 5 more positions there. And so we looked all over in our school within a school, which we're not calling that as we move forward, but in that area we added teaching positions. And so we looked all across our district to find places to where we could realign and offer either different services or unique services. And I can explain a spot for that in a little bit more. So in that arena, we are realigning some administrative assistance to the self-insurance fund. Learning supports. We're reducing learning information systems, which is our technology component. We're reducing our help desk manager. We found some places that were appropriate for some of the subscriptions that we have under PEPL, and we reduced the field technician summer help. This is a person that comes in and fixes Chromebooks over the summer for a total of $127,000. Learning supports. This is a department. We reduced this is the department Sara Harris is in. We reduced the clerical. We realigned our receptionist, a portion of their time, as we found they were working a lot with our non-publics in their Title I enrollment. We reduced the department discretionary funds. We realigned the district nurse partially to the self-insurance fund, which should allow us to add back in our shot and flu clinics for our employees. And we realigned our STARS mentoring to be partially funded out of Title I funding because she works a lot with our Title I people and students in buildings, for a total of 16% FTE at $110,000. In operations, this is kind of an ongoing process, but the reduction in custodial hours and positions and a realignment of salaries to other funds at a total of $234,000. Now that's a process that's ongoing. In special education, now these special education dollars that you see here, they are our set-aside dollar, our general education set-aside dollars. So we've reduced the secretary, we've reduced the director of this department, which we listed here, and the reduction of a specialist in that department for a total of $178,000. Now our administrators, we reduced, as listed above, but we're going to count it here. We reduced our community relations administrator to a specialist for a total of that. Reduce the HR, we are reducing a director of special education for the total amount. Reduction of 2 building administrators through attrition. What that means is Caparillo down at Smart and Kathy Bosco at North have resigned. You've already signed those and voted those, and we will be realigning other administrators into those positions. And we are going to move 1 building administrator to a categorical fund. There recently, through our DSAMI work, which is what the Phase 2 audit led us to, we have a huge need in our social, emotional, behavior, mental health field. It was our number 1 area of concern. And there's a recent addition to our categorical fund that for starting new programs, you can move salaries and benefits into there, and we've been working with the state to create that. And so that's the realignment of that for a total of $606,000. I'm not naming these positions just yet. As you guys know, the administration shuffle can happen when we need to move these positions, and that will be coming at a later date. So you can see the total number that we were tasked at getting, I think was, Claudia, around $1.5 million. Do you have an exact figure of what that was before? And the total is 1.772, 162. With a total loss of 22.88 FTE. We're also reduced. So, Claudia, will you take the last couple of paragraphs here?
In addition to these specific items that we've talked about, district-wide, we're also reducing 5 clerical positions, and I know there's discussions ongoing about it could be 4 to 7 other non-bargaining positions that are out in the school buildings that we're looking at reducing. And again, that's being reviewed to determine the way to best do that in the buildings and minimize the impact on students and programs. And again, to kind of give you more of a global perspective, looking at the certified reductions, which is the teacher reductions, that equates to 5.87% of the total teaching staff. And the administrator reductions that we've been talking about here total 7% of the total number of administrators, just to kind of give you a perspective on the totals of those.
Is that it?
That is the end of our report.
Okay, thank you very much. Normally, we wouldn't have questions and comments. This is a superintendent report. However, it's very important, and I'm certain that there are questions. So we'll go ahead and open this wide open for the board. Director Beck.
I have 3 questions. What is the difference between an administrator and a specialist?
So an administrator has the ability to run a department. They carry a different rights by Iowa code. So typically when we think of administrators, we think of directors and principals. Am I leaving anybody out? Maybe there's a couple places where there's associate directors and program directors. Sometimes they're administrators.
Okay.
So.
What's a specialist?
And a specialist is somebody that works underneath a program director. Like we have a reading specialist, we have a math specialist, we have an art specialist, which you saw on your sheet tonight. So the type of work that they do is specialized. And so in terms of our pecking order, superintendent, associate superintendent, directors, associate / program directors, specialists, generalists, and then I think we go to administrative assistants and secretaries. There are requirements that require us to have administrative assistants. I can't have a secretary because I'm a part of a bargaining unit, and I can't have a secretary because they're in the bargaining unit, if that makes sense. So that's what requires us to have an administrative assistant. So that's kind of our pecking order.
Thank you. 2 other questions. The way this looks is it looks like you're taking away the director of special education. Could you explain who is going to run special education?
Well, the way that it's currently running now, which is running very efficiently, is Associate Superintendent Scott oversees special education with the program director, Susan Downs. Does that make sense?
Yep. And then, sorry, writing it down. My last question is the community relations only has 4 people, and it's being reduced by 1.8 FTE. It only has 4 FTE, I should say, not necessarily 4 people. It's already very small. We already know that one of the things board members have brought up a number of times is communicating more with the community and sort of broadcasting the good stuff that's going on. And so can you explain why we would reduce this department so much when it's already quite small?
Actually, that recommendation came from Paul Erickson. When he sat down and worked with me, a lot of these recommendations came from there because he described to me red, yellow, green. Okay. And we were talking directly about what impacts students. Now, our issue is telling our story, and we're going to get better at that. I guarantee you we're going to get better at that. And through this with this reduction, as you can see, it says add part-time clerical support and add in that area where there's going to be a budget to potentially use outside agencies or inside agencies or whatever to put together marketing campaigns. So that's how that decision was made.
So basically, it's based on an efficiency study that having sort of a specialist who's got a combined skill set would benefit versus?
Exactly.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Those were my questions for now.
Director DeSalvo, did you have something?
I have several questions. So in the very first paragraph, well, I guess the second one really, during this time, student support staff increased by 107 in the past 10 years. So what increased and where?
That's a variety of positions. You guys may have more information than I do as far as some of the, like the coaches, not athletic coaches, but the teaching coaches, the behavior specialists, those types of positions. Again, they aren't doing direct instruction of students, but are providing other supports to the students.
So following this paragraph, were those 107 part of the reductions that were made? Or is that just a statement you're saying? Like,
That's just a statement to give you some perspective. Some of them, I think, are some of the non-bargaining cuts.
Correct.
so we added 107, but some of those are now being reduced. Is that a fair statement? Okay.
Yes.
The 191 then, that's a different pocket of people then? Or does the 107 go into the 191 and the 191 is what?
The 191 is a separate group. It's the administration and other support services. Principals, superintendent, other administrators, clerical staff, custodians, maintenance, service workers, which includes like food service employees, and some of the other non-bargaining professional staff are in that group.
So the reductions to both of these groups are included in the FTE counts on the following pages, right?
Some of them are.
Are you asking if these are reductions that were made, or are you? So
I'm just looking at the paragraph.
Sure.
I'm not even to your table yet, but I'm trying to follow the language here. So it stands out like a sore thumb to me, which I know the reason, but I want you to say it, is we've lost 855 students, but we've added 204 teachers, and we've added 107 administration. So we have a problem. We're losing students. We're adding people. This equation doesn't
that's
add.
exactly what
So
that paragraph says.
Okay. That's what I'm trying to get to. That's what I figured it was telling us, but I think it's very important that the public, I can't see without my glasses, understand that that's where we're after now, that we're off kilter. And for 8 years, the prior administration did not pink slip anyone. And we are now to this very serious point. So that's why this exercise is occurring. So I think that's very important for people to understand. TJ, when you said effective, did you just to continue ongoing, like there's not, so with the teachers, due to their contractual obligation, we had to do things by certain dates and that had to be effective by certain time periods, but with administrative staff, and I'll put that as a whole bucket, that's not required. So this will be continual.
Yes, absolutely. So these contracts, depending on if it's an Dr. Goldstone, be prepared here. If these contracts are administrative contracts that we need to terminate, then that has to be done by May 15th. If the non-bargaining contracts that you have in here, they've been notified, they've received a letter, they know that their last day is going to be June 30th. The clerical positions that you see in here, the secretarial position, those positions, the way that our structure works is that people that bid, the bidding system that we had for our secretaries, they bid to central office. Mm-hmm. So when we reduce a secretary at central office, that then follows their contractual language. So somebody will lose a job, but it might not be that person. Sure. So if we reduce a secretarial position, they follow suit.
Yeah.
Now, to this date, Rob,
I just wanted to clarify. I want to make sure not all non-bargaining have been notified at this point. Did you say?
Well, the people in this building. Now, the non-bargaining.
Not for the district.
Correct.
Okay.
In this building, they were notified.
Okay.
So.
Got it. So I have several other questions, if I may, but my broader question, high level, looking at the tables, and I'll start with community relations, very small department, Director Beck mentioned that. They reduced 45%. Then I look at larger departments like operations that have 121.4 FTEs and they've only reduced by 6%. And I know we're trying not across the board. We have to be smart in what we're doing, but it seems very offset in that some of your very small departments are giving up a lot of people and perhaps the larger ones aren't being equivalent. And I know this was a painstaking process. I know a lot of time and effort went into deciding these decisions, but that looks very, again, something that doesn't balance in my mind.
No, that's a great question, and we considered that very heavily during these discussions, and we looked back at historical data. And when a school board goes to make their cuts, they start as far away from the classroom as possible. So they think operations. And so for years we've been cutting our janitorial staff, our carpenters, and we're to a point now. And I had operations bring me the historical data, the data compared around the state. We're to a point now where if we continue to cut those services, our buildings will be affected. And so when we looked at these departments, that was heavily considered. So if we cut our carpenter, what is that? What is the equivalent of that to going out to bid or having a subcontractor outside? So what our district believes in and how we've operated is that to have a carpenter on staff with a list of items to do is the best way to efficiently work that. So we spent quite a bit of time analyzing exactly what you said. So it's not as if operations didn't take a cut. They just have been taking cuts all along the way. And so at this point right now, we felt that is, and it will be revisited every year. I'm not saying it's not, but we're about at a tipping point where we need to decide. Okay. We need to make a really tough decision about our buildings and our grounds and what they look like in facilities.
So you said that these figures were loaded. Correct. Everything's loaded. So when we show
Total package?
Right. So when we show, when I say loaded, I'm sorry, that's
okay.
So you say you've reduced $115,914 in community relations. Well, that's a loaded rate, so that's salary and benefits and everything. So when we report reductions to the state, I'm assuming that's the bottom line.
Total
that we
package.
give is the loaded FTE amount.
Yes, because that'll be the amount of our actual expenditures that are reduced, and that'll be reflected on the certified annual report. In the exhibits that I'm required to submit to the SBRC, they also are looking at FTE. Sure. So they're really going to get both numbers. They want to see the FTE that we're reducing and then the actual expenditures, which are the loaded rates that you referred to. That'll be reflected on our certified annual report.
How interesting that they want to know FTEs. One last question. I went back and I was looking at, and I don't even know if I have the most current plan. I was looking at our 5-year reduction plan. And so I was looking at where we said we would cut, and I'm not going to find the 1.7 million because I know it's chunked out. But I just want to make sure that in that 5-year reduction plan that's ever changing, that this will be reflected there.
Absolutely.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
And this is actually, we have the 2-year plan, and then
Right.
they wanted us to extend it 3 more years. So this is for next year, which is year 2 of the latest submission to the SBRC. So yes, it's all included.
So I probably as part of our committee or maybe for this board to show that on, these plans. So this is where we're at. I'm most curious, come June, I know it's your very busy time, but how we ended this year. Did we make what we told them we were going to do? And this is a big part of that. I know you are. So I think that's all I have for now. Thank you. Thanks.
Director Potts.
I have a question about the eliminating the special ed director. So we're creating a new model on how we're going to handle that with a specialist in charge, or what's the title of the person that's going to act as the special ed director?
The special ed director is right now Rob Scott, and he's an associate superintendent. And the person that's going to be doing the day-to-day work is a program director.
Okay, so is that an emerging new model that we're going to look at? I mean, if it's good for special ed, would it be good for other departments that have directors?
It could be something we evaluate. It's not something we're evaluating right now.
The reduction in the curriculum department, how was it determined that the 0.5 was going to be, I believe it's the instrumental music and art coordinator?
So we met with each director, and we worked as hard as we could to hit that number. And so Corey and I worked hard together, and those are the positions that we.
Okay, I'm concerned because vocal and instrumental music and art are kind of like banner programs we have in our district. We put that out as one of the things that we do very well, and I don't know that we can sustain that with half a director. Was there any consideration given to? Didn't we create two program director positions in the last couple of years in curriculum?
There are 3 program director positions in curriculum, and one of them.
Did we look at? I know the program directors. I think they're 6-figure people.
They're administrators.
Did we take a look at maybe reducing there as opposed to?
Yes, we reviewed those positions.
Okay.
Our director of I'm sorry.
Okay, I just think that's a potential place to save some money.
Noted. Our director of athletics, I believe, is half-time. The specialists that are inside that department, every one of them work just like Sarah does. So for the director to pick, she was up here. Our CTE specialist, our reading and math specialist. So those were all decisions that were not made lightly.
I just have a concern there.
Director Hayes.
Curriculum was also my concern. I like the way you broke down with the operations that they've been cut all along, but with the curriculum department, I don't know that there've been cuts. It almost seems like there've been additions, and I'm wondering, where we are with that department being so large.
Well, one of the things that I looked at was the board members had said there's 22 people in curriculum. Why not that area? So I went and looked at the number that was reported to the curriculum department. There were about 5 or 7 people that were listed on there that are not in the curriculum department. They just happen to be housed in that vicinity. So there are 3 cultural liaisons. There are there's an information specialist and a couple of other people that are listed there, and that's not actually our curriculum department. For some reason, the report that you got showed our curriculum department as inflated. So our curriculum department is not actually the number that you saw. And so the reduction of the data specialist, the clerical specialist, and our data specialist, a clerical and a specialist is a part of also a historical cuts that have been made. They've lost several specialists. Actually, when adding the administrators that were in those areas, there was reductions in specialists and movings and allowable expenses that were moved into English language, our ELL students. And so out of those areas, we became more efficient, but that's the reason why it looks like the numbers that you're seeing are not actually what our curriculum department is. And I also, in conversations with Paul, things that are green, everything in that department is directly related to the instruction and an assessment that happens with our students, every single thing. And so the brunt of the work that is done inside of that department is what we do as educators. And so when we talk about, that's why Mr. Potts is feeling so anxious about that department, because that's the work with students, that's the work with teachers, that's improving teaching and learning and instruction. And so That is what we do.
Okay, I do understand that, and with the teachers that we had our last meeting, although the work begins in the curriculum department, it ends at the front line, right there with the teachers. So it's not a it's a very difficult decision that we have to make, but those are just some questions that come up.
I love those.
Director Gosa, do you have anything to add?
I just want to say, again, I'm speaking for myself. This is my opinion. I guess I just want to explain the reason why I say I want to see more administrative cuts is I look at it like a tree, okay? You can only grab so much low-lying fruit. If you don't start taking some of the fruit from the top of that tree, it's going to get top-heavy and fall over. I like that you're doing something, but I want to see some meatier cuts and not administrative assistants and secretaries. I want to see some where we're actually going to make some real reduction in the budget instead of taking all this low-lying fruit. I understand why you're doing it, but eventually that tree's going to get so heavy it's going to fall over. And that's where I'm at. That was all I had.
All right, thank you. Are there any additional questions or comments? Okay, very good. We'll move on to other items requiring action. May I have a motion regarding approval of the 2018-19 budget amendment?
Mr. President,
Director DeSalvo.
I move that the board approve administration's recommendation to amend the 2018-19 certified budget in the following areas for the following amounts. Instruction, $128,707,000, and total other expenditures, $29,087,674.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Director DeSalvo.
So in reading this, Claudia, even though we are increasing these amounts, these expenditures, there is no increase coming to the taxpayer, correct?
That's correct.
That's all I had. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Director Gosa.
No, I don't have anything.
All right, we'll call for the vote. Director DeSalvo.
Yes.
Director Hayes.
Yes.
Director Gosa.
Yes.
Director Beck.
Yes.
Director Potts.
Yes.
And my vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. May I have a motion regarding approval of the proposed 2019-20 budget?
Mr. President.
Director DeSalvo.
Mr. President, sorry to have my mic on. I move that the board accept administration's recommendation to adopt and certify the budget and tax levy rate for the 2019-20 fiscal year as published and presented. The proposed property tax levy rate per 1,000 taxable valuation will be $15.262338, and resources and requirements are estimated at $268,151,093.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Director DeSalvo.
Again, just to clarify, this is actually a reduction to taxpayers?
It's a reduction in the tax rate.
Yes.
The actual amount paid by the taxpayer depends upon their assessed valuation, which is set by the county.
Thank you for clarifying that. And this came about because property values increased?
Yes, the assessed valuations increased by approximately 4.3% for next year.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? I've got a couple questions. So 4.3%, and that's in our district. And I think I asked one other time, do you know what the increase was either in Davenport or in Scott County, or both?
I don't have that breakdown, but overall, when I ran through the whole aid and levy worksheet that I'm required to submit, it looks at our total assessed valuation for our district, and it's up by 4.3%.
And I understand that. It just seems like Davenport was giddy because theirs was over 5%. And I thought, man, I mean, it's just frustrating that, and especially, and I didn't look for the county increase, but you would think that ours would be similar to Davenport.
I think it's fairly close, but our district encompasses parts of Muscatine County and then parts of Scott County that would be outside of the city of Davenport's taxing boundaries.
And I understand that, but 0.7% is probably over 10% of difference. I'm just guessing without going through the calculations. What was the levy rate? What is the current levy rate?
It's about 19 cents higher.
19 cents? And what are the ramifications if we didn't accept this recommendation?
I'm not quite sure. We are required, as a taxing body, we are required to have this submitted to the county auditor and the Department of Management by April 15th. When the Department of Management receives this information that you hopefully will certify and approve tonight, they do their final adjustments on it. It can come in a little bit different. You have the right to, we can instruct the Department of Management and the county to tax at a lower rate, but we cannot go higher than the rate you approve.
I understand that, but what I'm getting at is that if we said we want to stay at our current rate, then we would generate a whole bunch of additional cash, right?
Yes, the way to get to that rate would be through our cash reserve levy. All the other components are pretty well set. So it would be the cash, which we would not have spending authority to use.
I understand we wouldn't have spending authority, but but it's always frustrating to me when we get a recommendation from the administration that we go ahead and reduce the rate, especially when we're in a situation like we're in. We don't have the requirement to reduce our taxes. Can you tell me the excess, if we left it at the current rate, 19 cents of additional tax, and would all of that go into the reserves, or where would that go?
It would be in the cash reserve.
So it'd be in the reserves, and the reserves are kind of capped, I think, by the legislature at 1% of the regular budget, if I remember right, somewhere around 20%. Is that
Yes.
correct? Where are we right now?
I would have to dig through my sheets. I think we're at less than 5%.
We're at 5%?
I believe so. I'd have to verify that. Now, even though our rate is going down because the assessed values increased, the actual amount of property taxes that we're projecting to receive in next year, fiscal 20, are higher than the taxes we're receiving this year.
And I can accept that, but one of the things I believe also, and you kind of hit on it a little bit ago, is that we could modify our levy rate down, but we can't modify it up.
Correct.
And so if we said, well, we're going to stay at 19 cents, and I don't know if you have an idea how much that would generate, would it put us, it'd probably put us closer to 20% in our reserves. And I don't know when the district developed a recommendation on the reserves, and I believe that recommendation is there, and we've had that discussion before, but do you have a recommendation on what our reserves should be as a percent? Let's use that.
I think we're pretty close to where we should be, around the 5%. We use that to, again, kind of even out our cash flow in the months of July and August when we don't receive state aid. And also to even things out, we receive our two property tax, the two installments, the largest amounts we receive in April and October. So having that additional cash reserve levy that comes in as, part of that payment helps to even out our cash flow. And I think we're in pretty good shape.
I wish we had that information, that we knew what is the recommendation that we made as a district. It was probably 10 years ago that we made that recommendation, but I thought it was much higher than 5%.
I would have to research that. And
Right.
look back.
As a financial person, why would you not want to have greater reserves than 5% if the state says we recommend that you have up to 20%?
Partly because we don't have the authority to spend it. And I think being good stewards of the taxpayers' money to assess property taxes at a rate that we're not allowed to spend, I don't think that's what we should be doing. And I think, like I said, I think the rate we've got is sufficient to meet our cash flow needs.
But if we adopt what you just said, then we would really want to try to get to 0%. I mean, there's a continuum between negative and 20%. And you're recommending that we be at or around 5%. I believe that the district recommendation is higher than that.
I've not seen, I'd have to research that. I know I have seen recommendations on some other financial ratios. I haven't seen one on actual cash reserves. We're usually talking about our equity ratio, the financial reserves, but I can look into that.
Yeah, the problem is that we have to submit this by April 15th, which is, when is that?
A week from today.
When we make the vote, is there any additional work you need to do to provide that number?
All the documents and the board records that Mary will compile, we have to physically take those down to the county auditor's office, and then there are electronic files that I have to send to the Department of Management.
All right. Well, I'm just going to say that I have the highest regard for your recommendation. I would support a higher percentage of reserves, and I know that in the past we've been up to close to 20%, and that was some years ago. So I just want to let it be known that I'm likely to not support the recommendation, and we'll just see what happens. So, is there any other discussion? Director Beck.
Could you just explain for a layperson who knows nothing about money, such as myself? Ralph kind of brings up a point that I've been rolling around in my head since the very first time I heard about tax levies. Why don't we just tax the maximum we can, or leave it where it is right now, the 19 cents higher than it is, than we're proposing? why can't we spend that money? Like what's the whole point of having cash reserves, I guess, would be the good question, the question.
We are bound by state code to spend only at or less, preferably, our spending authority, which is part of a big formula that is based on the number of students we've got and the amount of state aid and that kind of thing that's generated. The cash reserve levy, like I said, helps us even out cash flow in the months when we're not getting our state aid payments. It's kind of gives us a little cushion, you know, some funds in the bank to be prepared for things. And when a district is operating with a budget that's well below the spending authority, that particular district's board may, during the year, or management may decide during the year to, you know, take on some new initiative, some new program, stay within their spending authority, and have the cash available to pay for that initiative or that program.
So basically, it's like a rainy day fund that can only be used under certain circumstances.
Right, within that spending authority.
Within that spending authority, okay. I think maybe I finally get it. I apologize.
That's okay, it's
Asking.
complicated.
All right, thank you very much. Oh, one other question.
Sure, Director Beck.
One other follow-up to that. So if we're capped at, our reserves can't be more than 20% of, what was it, our total budget?
It's the cash reserve levy.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Mhm.
Okay. So what would happen if we went past that?
We would not, that would not get approved by the Department of Management.
Okay.
They would adjust
You
it
can't
for us.
actually go past that.
Right.
Okay.
Anything else? I want to kind of make sure that last comment, because whoever it is at the state, they have that authority to simply, if we went over, they just adjust it. The way I understand, they whack it. And we could say we want to go to 25%, and they say, too bad, and they strike it out, and they then develop our tax levy rate, the way I understand it, to make us comply with the state code recommendation or requirement that we be no higher than 20%. Is that kind of right?
Yes, and actually in the huge spreadsheet that I'm required to fill out and submit, they've got all those formulas locked in, and they physically would not let me put in that amount in the spreadsheet, even if I wanted to.
But without knowing where 19 cents would take us, I mean, that might only take us to 8%.
But you still
or
can't spend
something.
it.
What's that?
But you're still unable to spend it.
Not right now.
Right.
But anyway, is there any other discussion? Director Gosa, do you have anything?
No.
Okay, then I'm going to call for the vote. Director DeSalvo.
I'm going to vote yes because I don't want to put an increase to our taxpayers when we don't have the authority to spend that money. If the state would allow us to spend it, then I would say leave it as it is, but we can't. So it doesn't make sense to me to burden our taxpayers when we have no authority to spend that additional money. So I'm in favor of this reduction, as silly as it sounds, as we sit up here and say we're making budget cuts. Why aren't we asking for more money? We can't because we don't have the authority to spend it. So my vote is yes.
And thank you for your explanation also. Director Hayes.
I totally agree with that. And being good stewards, you know, we need to bring it down. So my vote would be yes.
Director Beck.
I'll vote yes.
Director Gosa.
Yes.
Director Potts.
Yes.
And my vote is no. The Motion passes. Thank you. May I have a motion regarding approval of budget guarantee?
Mr. President,
Director Hayes.
I move the board approve the following resolution. Resolve that the Board of Directors of the Davenport Community School District will levy property tax for fiscal year 2019-20 for the regular program budget adjustment as allowed under section 257.14 Code of Iowa.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Director DeSalvo.
So this is another funny one because when the state doesn't allow us enough, they don't pay us enough money per student to cover our budgets. We can go into a budget guarantee that then comes back to the citizens of Davenport and increases your taxes so that we can get enough money to cover our expenses. Very screwy, isn't it? But Claudia, correct me if I'm going astray here, but that's what this is about. So as a taxpayer, go after your legislators because they're not funding us appropriately. And all it does is take the burden off the state and comes right back to the city. Silly.
Anything else? All right, we'll call for the vote. Director Hayes.
Yes.
Director Beck.
Yes.
Director DeSalvo.
Yes.
Director Gosa.
Yes.
Director Potts.
Yes.
And my vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. May I have a motion regarding approval of bid for the Central Softball Remodel Project?
Mr. President.
Director Hayes.
I move that the board approve the lowest responsive bid of $140,000 for J.B. Robinson for the Central Softball House Remodel Project.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? All right, we'll call for the vote. Director Hayes.
Yes.
Director Beck.
Yes.
Director Potts.
Yes.
Director DeSalvo.
Yes.
Director Gosa.
No.
My vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. May I have a motion regarding approval of the bid for Central High LED Lighting and Controls Project?
Mr. President,
Director Hayes.
I move the board approve the award a bid for the Central LED Lighting and Control Project to the lowest responsive bidder, Tri-City Electric Company, in the amount of $406,248.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Excuse me, what was that?
Did you say 436? Okay, sorry.
Director Potts? Okay, thank you. Is there any discussion?
I have a question. I'm not sure.
All right, I'll call for the vote.
Wait, I have a question, but I'm not sure that I can ask.
Go ahead.
Is this a contractor that we have had problems with in the past? Tri-City.
No, this is one of the electrical contractors that has done a great deal of our work, both for technology and for other electrical work, and we have not had difficulties with them.
The Brady Street Stadium project, we didn't have issues with Tri-City there.
Valley Construction was the general contractor at Brady Stadium.
And Tri-City wasn't involved in that.
I'm not certain if Tri-City was an electrical contractor at Brady or not, but the general contractor there that I think you're concerned about was Valley Construction.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Okay, we'll call for the vote. Director Hayes,
Yes.
Director Potts,
Yes.
Director Beck,
Yes.
Director DeSalvo,
Yes.
Director Gosa,
Yes.
and my vote is yes. Motion carries. May I have a motion regarding approval of bid for the North High Fieldhouse?
Mr. President,
Director DeSalvo.
I finally move that the board approve the lowest responsive bid of $972,777, but to Valley Construction of Rock Island for the North High Field House project.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Director DeSalvo.
I can't even do it. Tell me about Valley Construction. I'm gonna just crawl away. I just won't even.
Well, Valley Construction's one of the largest. Valley Construction's one of the largest companies in the area for that kind of work, and especially for heavy civil work. And they also are the lowest responsive bidder. And the way Iowa code defines it, their bid is responsive and responsible.
Did you have more, Director DeSalvo? Director Beck.
Why couldn't, since I noticed Swanson Construction comes in at 978,000, and I know there is a little bit of wiggle room in terms of accepting the lowest responsible bidder, for example, if you've had problems with a company in the past. So is there a reason we wouldn't want to accept Swanson's bid?
Well, with all construction problems, you run into unforeseen problems. Valley's done several construction projects for the school district successfully without issue. They do a lot of projects, and I think we will have success. I'm confident we'll have success on this project.
Thank you.
Director Hayes.
With the numbers being so close, what is the contingency built in there for change orders? How much is that?
There's none built into the contract, but the project budget you approved when we had the public hearing for this project included, and it typically includes about 10% in the project budget. That's not in that number, so you will see change orders as required by the contract.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Did you just say there would be no change orders?
No, I said the number in front of you tonight is the contract without any change orders. When we bring you a project for approval at the public hearing, that is a complete project budget. So we anticipate change orders. So that's text, title, and tags. That's all changes. That's design work. And that's the budget you see initially when you approve a project.
So this 972,000, you're saying that's going to grow quite a bit?
I don't know what that's going to grow. This being a green construction project, it's not a renovation. We have the majority of unknowns known at this point. I don't foresee it growing a lot, but in construction, there is always that possibility.
So if it grew 10%, and you're saying that they put the contingency in, or do you put it in?
We do. When we bring you the 95% plans, that number on the bottom, we say this project is budgeted for X number of dollars in SAVE or Pebble funds. That number includes a built-in contingency that operations departments includes. It includes the design fees for the engineers, the architects, and material testing.
So it's likely, I'm just guessing, but if the contingency is going to be 10%, and I tried to do a quick calculation because it isn't just 10% of the 972, I don't think. It's 10% of the total, right? That which would be different than 10% of 972.
Well, the contingency is just a number we add to give you a budget estimate, and it's typically based off construction number, which in this project would be the 972.
So, and then you're going to have architecture fees, which are probably another 10%, right?
Typically a little less, depending on size project, between 7 and 11.
So, I mean, we could be at $1 million plus, like 1.3 million or something by the time you're done.
We won't be anywhere near that high, but I'd have to check what the 95% budgets. I think this one was budgeted at 1.1 million.
Is there a sense of urgency to approving this tonight?
Oh, my. You're gonna kill her. I'm gonna kill you. I'm gonna kill you. You heard it. You are my witnesses. I'm going to kill him. I don't care who does. You will find him in the Mississippi tomorrow. Oh my God. I can't.
No, a delay in start will obviously result in a delay in completion. I said a delay in starting the project will result in a delay in completion.
Okay, let me ask it differently. You said Valley was the general contractor on the Brady Street?
Correct.
And did Brady Street come in under budget?
It came under the budget we gave you when we started the project, which was 2.5 million.
Which was 2.5 million, which included the extra lanes, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then recently we found out about a big change order because my interpretation was that the representation was that the general contractor didn't realize that it was wet near Duck Creek.
Well, that's from the structural engineer. As designed by the structural engineer, once we got into the soil, we had to make changes to make the facility structurally sound.
Well, I understand that, but I think that any reasonable person would have known that Duck Creek is wet. We don't need to wait for some sort of engineer to come out and tell us that it's wet over there. Where I'm going is this change order issue is a big, big deal. And you know that the board recently, did we pass that policy? To allow the board to
Do the matrix.
Yes, we did.
okay. I'm just really concerned. I want to approve this tonight. I really do. But I don't want to approve it and then have a whole bunch of change orders. That is, this board is really frustrated with the number of change orders and the appearance that change orders might be intentionally not considered in the full price that's given. I just want to make absolutely sure that you two up there are saying these numbers are real and that 972,777 is real, and we aren't going to see that there's a wet spot somewhere and, well, there's another $500,000 or something like that. Can you vouch for Valley Construction in this case?
I think they're a responsible contractor, and I think that the risk on this particular project are much lower than they are on others, including Brady. I wanted to make clear that on the Brady Stadium change orders, I was not here when you approved that change order, but I did look at the video, and there was a lot of expression of concern that the board was caught off guard or was unaware and so forth. And I had included in your packet last month or so a memo from last August when we first brought the discussion to you to say, if we continue with this as planned, there will be these additional foundation costs. So we did alert the board in advance. This was one where the change order work wasn't done prior to the board being made aware of it. but the board was made aware in advance and approximately what the cost was, and I think we were right in the ballpark. I believe we said it would be 90, 100,000, and it ended up being 91,000 for the foundation and some other things. When we have gone back, in fact, a few years ago, you asked us to review a whole series of projects, and we randomly sampled a number of projects, and we looked at the number of change orders and the dollar value of change orders as a percentage of the construction costs. And from our perspective, we really just don't have any extraordinary change order costs, either in numbers of change orders or in dollar value of change orders. A lot of change orders that we have on a variety of projects, in my experience here, have been because of things the owner, we, changed our mind about or wanted to add something or combine something and so forth. But there just haven't been an extraordinary amount of change orders that are a result of unknowns or oversights or things of that nature. When we do particularly renovation work to existing, it is inevitable that you will run into found conditions that no one could have been aware that will create change orders. So I wanted to speak to that, to the discussion I observed the board had about the Brady Street change order there. It is correct as well to say Valley Construction had some difficulties at Brady Stadium. We made them rework a substantial portion of the track because they didn't meet our quality standards, and we discovered that, and we made them redo the work. That caused a delay and so forth. But when we move along to this current project and bid there, a responsible contractor, they are, a large group in the area, and there's no reason for us, under the current rules or under the rules prevailing at the time of the bid, to exclude them. The board has been working on adjusting the contracting rules to give us more criteria by which we might be able to bring other evaluation factors in to the award. And if that policy has since been adopted, I'm not sure. It wasn't in effect at the time we issued this bid, but going forward, those additional criteria that the board wants to introduce into the decision-making process would allow us more flexibility. But of course, according to some predetermined criteria, we couldn't just come in after the fact and say, we like these guys better than the other guys.
No, certainly not. And I'll stop here shortly, but it does alarm me when you say that they had low quality at Brady Street and we had to make them redo it. And that gives me pause. And I think, okay, are they going to just be low quality? That's something. And Eric, you said, well, under current rules, they're the lowest responsive bidder. But I'm going, do we have a set of quality specs so that they can't come in and do low quality work so that they get the low bid? And I'm just very, very concerned, and I'll express a concern about how do we track all this stuff. But you're confident that they're going to provide a quality field house?
We have adequate plans and specifications that require good quality work, that meet standards, and we will require that the contractor meet those specifications, just as we did at Brady.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Director Gosa, do you have anything?
I think you guys covered most of my questions. The only thing I'll point out, Brady Street Stadium, is because we had that massive brick facade put on and that added weight to it, and that's why that stuff needed to be beefed up. So that's why that was, because sometimes we go way too big on our projects. And that's all I'll say.
Okay, very good. We'll call for the vote. Director DeSalvo.
Absolutely, yes.
Director Hayes,
Yes.
Director Beck,
Yes.
Director Gosa,
Yes.
Director Potts.
Yes.
And I vote emphatically yes.
Yes. Thank you. This is a historical day.
All right. Thank you very much. May I have a motion regarding approval of the bid for the West Corridor project?
Mr. President,
Director Hayes,
I move the board approve the lowest responsive bid of Sheets General Construction in the amount of $589,700 for the West Corridor project.
thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Director Beck.
I noticed that you provided for us a bid tally sheet. It looks like it's from the architects. Could you explain that a little bit for us?
Yes, I'd have to double check the sheets on why that didn't get in on the first project, but we have that for every project. But also in your memo, I recapped that, and it doesn't have marked that they found the addendum and they had their bid bond, but I give you every bidder and their price.
Okay.
So it's redundant information, but we can ensure that's provided every time if you'd like.
Right. My question about the change order fee. So it's got the prices, you know, you've got your check marks and things
Yep.
like that. What exactly does that mean, the change order fee?
In the contract, the AAA contract, there's a line where you can fill out the change order. Some contracts we dictate it, and others we allow them to make a proposal and count that into their bid.
So that would be a fee charged anytime there is a change order,
Yes, that's their general overhead on a change order.
even if it's their fault?
No, if it's their fault, there is no cost at all incurred by the district.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Director DeSalvo.
Does this conclude the West Corridor project?
Yes.
So this would be the last phase of
Yes, this is the entire second floor, and the alternate is actually redoing the area right by the office so that it matches. So all the corridors will be complete after this.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? I don't recall ever seeing this change order fee, and maybe I just have missed it, but is that a maximum change order fee, or is it just a kind of a guess?
No, that's a set fee for any additional work above and beyond.
So they cannot go beyond that 15%.
No, it's for all work they do above contract work, there's an additional 15% fee. And that's standard in the construction industry. That's their overhead and profit for all of the work they do above and beyond contract work.
So, but you've got different fees indicated. Some
Yes.
are 10%, and this can't be just overhead. I mean, that has to be part of their when they're developing their costs. They can't.
They develop their cost for the plans and specs. Change orders are for work that is above the plans and specs, so it was never counted in their original bid. So they can't account for their overhead on work they didn't plan on doing.
But then it's just a guess, it sounds like. Is what you're telling me is that here's my bid, and then I'm guessing that there's another 15% that I want that authority. Well, tell me what it is. I still do not understand.
The change order fee there is the general contractor's markup on subcontractor work. Because the general contractor often isn't doing the electrical work, the plumbing work, the site development work. The subcontractors do that. The general contractor has to say, if there's additional work that you want me to do, I'm gonna have to pay my subs, but I've gotta supervise that. I've gotta take care of my insurance costs, general conditions, my overhead, and profit on that additional work that you've asked me to do that wasn't in the plans. So what that is the markup the general contractor may apply to additional work performed by subs for materials, supplies, labor, and so forth.
All right, so if it's $1 million project, I'm going to bid $1 million, and I'm going to bid, well, the 15% or 50%, that doesn't go into your consideration of what is lowest responsible bidder, right? Because you're talking about above and beyond the specs. And so I could bid low, put a 50% change order fee in, which is my fee if I have to have subs do some additional work. And I could, if I did it right, if I played it right, and then I would be entitled to that additional 50%. And it really has nothing to do with your decision on which is the right company. Is that correct?
In the initial selection,
Right.
currently, no, it would not. It's
Right.
lowest responsible bidder.
Okay. I'm appalled at that. But we'll discuss it maybe in policy or something. It just, I don't accept that. Any other discussion? Did we lose Director Beck?
Yes.
Is she coming back?
Yes.
Oh. Okay, we'll wait.
She couldn't wait.
Huh?
She couldn't wait. She had to excuse herself.
Oh, we have?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I didn't
We've been
even.
talking for most of it.
Yeah.
Huh? Yeah, since we've already got one board member that has taken a break, we'll go ahead and have a 5-minute recess. All right. Thank you all for putting up with us. It is kind of a long evening. We did not call the vote on the last motion, which was the approval of the bid for the West Corridor project. We had some discussion. Is there any additional discussion? All right, we'll call for the vote. Director Hayes?
Yes.
Director Beck?
Yes.
Director DeSalvo?
Yes.
Director Gosa?
No.
Director Potts?
Yes.
My vote is yes. May I have a motion regarding, oh, I'm sorry, the motion passes. May I have a motion regarding approval of the Heartland AEA 28E agreement?
Mr. President,
Director Hayes.
I move the board approve the AEA 28E agreement technology cooperative contract in the amount of $76,816.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Director DeSalvo.
I would just say that this product is one that, while Paul Erickson was here, found that this Business Plus software system could be used in more ways than what we're using it now. So it sounds like this is a good opportunity. Certainly want to renew this because I think that this software will be beneficial for other changes that we're working on.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? All right, we'll call for the vote. Director Hayes?
Yes.
Director Beck?
Yes.
Director Gosa?
Yes.
Director DeSalvo?
Yes.
Director Potts?
Yes.
And my vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. We have a discussion item, which is the special education update.
All right. All right, I am going to just show us our data that we look at now weekly. And you can see where we were last week for Appendix A. We had 91% complete, and we are now at 95%. And then last week for Appendix B, we were at 95.25%, and we are now at 97.03%, and we're projecting we'll be done by April 23rd easily.
but that's up there for you, and I'm gonna go back up here. Oops. I'll come back to that. And then just for the comp ed, again, we're now up to 299 students who've been determined owed compensatory ed, and then you can see our percentages of students or numbers of students that are currently receiving, that have declined, the no-shows, and then the number that we've completed, that we just keep moving forward on that. We've seen that so many times. So let's do this. So now we're gonna go ahead and talk about disproportionality a little bit more, because that is one of our biggest systemic issues that we must keep moving forward on. And when we talk about it, we want to talk about disproportionality when we look at the data. That's the indicator that there's an issue. Just like when I take my temperature and if I have a fever, the fever is an indicator that there's something wrong. And then, but it doesn't tell me what that is, right? And then I have to go in and figure out what's causing the problem. And then our goal is to create more equity for our students, for all of our students, when it comes to having them be successful behaviorally and academically. And last meeting, we kind of had, as we were talking through it at the last Cal meeting, there was some confusion, and so we want to clear some things up a little bit more. And I have to scroll down here. Whoops. So.
As Susan said at the last meeting, we had a lot of questions about the term disproportionality, concerning the depth of knowledge of people in this room and beyond, about support to teachers, and concerning the role of the school board. So we wanted to give you some background about some of those issues tonight. So the packet that I gave you, we're not going to go through. It's just reading for your leisure when you get a chance, but they are addressing some of the things that you brought up. The first is the discipline disparities, and this is another term that's used that can be used as far as disproportionality or equity or whatever, but they're choosing to call it discipline disparities. You can see that the center is noted on the slide, and this was done in 2017. The only point that I want to point out to you is the very first myth, and that's that disparities aren't really related to race, class, or sexual orientation. They are really about the challenges of poverty. And then you can see that the fact is that poverty does not fully explain racial disparities. We often hear that it's a policy issue, and there is research to show that that is not the case. So this will be very interesting for you, that front and back piece. The next one that's in there is from the Toro College Lander Center for Educational Research. This was done in 2011, and it is defining some terms again: disproportionality, educational practices, and so that is one that we also offer as well. When you go to the back couple of pages, there's a lot of other research if you should want to explore that. The NEA policy brief is specifically rated to disproportionality of African American students in special education. So this is one of our issues, and so I thought that this would be particularly interesting to you. This comes from a 2008 is the date on this particular information. And then last but not least, there's a 2012 Disproportionality and Disciplinary Action in Public Education. It's a lit review. And it goes back, it starts at, the date of this particular document is 2012, but it has literature and research that started in 2011. It takes you all the way back to 1987. And so while some of these things may seem dated, they're not dated, they just show you that this has been a discussion for a very long time. I also have, we did not make copies of this, but I'd be happy to share it with any of you because it's rather thick and we were trying to not make copies that may not be helpful. But this is truth in labeling disproportionality in special education. And so I'd be happy to share this with anybody who would like to take it with them. So just, we're not going to go through it in any detail. It's just information, background information for you to review when you get a chance. Yeah.
Do you have a digital version of that one that you just said was?
I do.
Could you just email it?
Absolutely.
That'd be great.
Be
Thank you
happy
very much.
to.
Please,
How do we make
appreciate
this
it.
move? Be happy to. Thank you. We also wanted to then take it from a national level to a state level. If you go onto the Iowa Department of Education webpage and search disproportionality, this is the webpage that comes up. It tells you the criteria for determination of significant disproportionality and also gives you data and for at least the last 2 years, and they update that periodically as far as including data. They also have some discussions on the webpage about equity and disproportionality that's relevant to conversations that have been had in Iowa that you may want to take advantage to review. And then also, we talked about the school board responsibilities last week. Went onto the Iowa Association School Board webpage. They do not talk about disproportionality, but they do talk about equity and family engagement. As a matter of fact, they have a conference coming up next week, April 18th. And this is just part, this year's conference is related to the ESSA law, the Every Student Succeeds Act, which does address equity. And then you can see I pulled out a couple of general sessions about what they're going to be talking about as far as policy and governance to achieve equity and family engagement. So if any of you are going to that, you might want to take advantage of that information. So just wanted, based upon the questions that we have, to give you a little bit of background nationally and statewide. You have asked as well, are there any other districts that are dealing with this in Iowa? We do know that there are 3 or 4?
3, I think.
3 districts in Iowa that have had to dedicate a portion of their special education dollars to disproportionality, same as Davenport has. And so it is an issue beyond Davenport in Iowa as well. So I'm going to turn it back over to Susan.
Okay. So last time we talked about a little bit of our 2017-18 data, and I'm just showing you again that our percent of students receiving 1 or more suspensions last year, we noted by the end of last year, after a full year, that 21% of our African Americans received 1 or more days of suspensions versus 7% of our Caucasian students. Just looking at that, the rate of suspension for our African American students is about 3 times as high as the rate of suspension for our Caucasian students. This is a nationwide trend. And then if you look at, we've got a couple of other races that stand out. And so we looked at this year's data, 2018 through 2019, percent of race receiving 1 or more out-of-school suspensions. This actually goes from August through May, so 3 quarters of the year versus last year's data, which was all 4 quarters. And again, you can see that we're pretty much suspending at the rate that we did last year, in that our African American students are being suspended about 3 times as much. They're 3 times as more likely to be suspended as their Caucasian counterparts, and 2 or more races are about twice as likely. So we're still struggling in that area. We haven't made a lot of movement. We've worked on a lot of other things that came out of the accreditation, but this has got to be a focus. And then the 2018-19 suspension data from August through March, you can see that of the students that received, of the suspensions that we have, the total number of suspensions, 31% were for students who are Caucasian, when they make up 54% of our population. 42.2% were students who were African American, when they make up 19.9% of our population. This is where, again, it just shows the disparity, and it's something, this data is an indicator that we have to kind of go back and look at what's going on and what can we put in place, what practices can we put in place to help change what this looks like, right? We have some pretty effective methods when it comes to our Caucasian students, and I'm going to show you academic achievement. So last week I showed you when we controlled for socioeconomic status for behavior for last year's data. This is actually controlling for socioeconomic status in terms of academic. And again, students who come from low socioeconomic status, there is an achievement gap between how they achieve on our Iowa assessments versus students who come from middle to upper class families. And then even within those two socioeconomic status, we can see that there's racial disparity in terms of achievement. So all this tells us, again, as an indicator, is that we clearly have some practices in place that are more effective for some populations and not as effective for other groups of students. And then just as a district, we need to start looking at that and coming up with ways we can tweak our practices or add to our instructional practices so that we're benefiting all students the same. But that's just looking again, that it's not only behavior, but academic achievement where we're struggling the disparity. So then this is you.
Yes, so having looked at the data, you'll have a chance to look at the research and some of the lit reviews. I just want to remind you that in 15 days, you will have known about this for a year. And so it is really time for us to move forward into next steps because you've had a year now to digest this. And so it's very, very important that we start to show action into this. And so some of the next steps would be to organize the work of our national experts. We have gone back and looked at the teaching and learning plan and have, and I see that some of my arrows are all over the place, but we do have equity goals for subpopulations, that the referrals for African American students would reduce by 20%. The eligibility for special education, whether a student is Caucasian, Black, Hispanic, whatever, would be 100% individualized. That's the very nature of special education. That the academics for students who are African American would not go down by 15%, as that misplaced arrow would suggest, but would rather be increased by 15%, and that early childhood enrollment for students of color would increase by 10%. So these are the data that you should be asking for all the time to see, are we getting close to these goals that we have established for subpopulations of students in different areas. We need to set specific improvement actions related to equity, set high expectation, then follow through with accountability with the infrastructure as far as inspecting the progress. And if we're not getting the progress that we want, then we should be redirecting when necessary and building that into evaluations. Support to teachers to support all students. We have a lot of professional development to do. We have tools. As a matter of fact, I was in contact with some colleagues yesterday who were sharing with me that there is a school district in Georgia who has made significant progress in their disproportionality. And so I have the contact information. I'm going to be contacting that gentleman so that he can be a resource to us. Where did they start? What did they do? And so really broaden our experience into those that have already had success. And then again, as we've talked, to set high expectations, follow through with inspecting what's working and what's not, and then redirecting when we're not having the success that we would expect. Questions, comments?
Director Beck.
First of all, I really appreciate this. This is sort of, I know we were asking a lot of questions, but just even, and I know this isn't like telling us what to do, but just even giving us some ideas of where to go and that kind of thing. You guys are the ones who know better than we do.
Sure.
So when you talk about the goals, the equity goals, for example, referrals down 20% or something like that, is there sort of a common metric for how often would you want to see that in a year? Would that be a 5-year goal and we just want to see like 5% improvement each year or something like that?
I think that that's something that we need to benchmark out. One of the things that we did do this year was to define for principals and all district staff what is a removal according to Iowa code. And so we're much, much better now at collecting valid data and reliable data so that one school is collecting it the same way as another school. And so we feel as though we have a good baseline now. And then also when we're looking at, so the answer to your question is it would be very good for us, and we will, benchmark that 20% out.
Okay.
So we want to be at 5% at a certain point, at 10% at a certain point, and then redirect if we're not. Same thing with all of those particular bullets. The other thing that we're having a lot of conversation about is, as we all know, equity is not equal. And so if we have some schools that are struggling more than others, to redirect our resources to those schools. And if we have some schools that are doing very, very well, leave them alone in this particular area. Let them continue to do the wonderful things that they're doing. I was talking to a principal today and said one of the things that we want to do for our professional development next year is to really highlight some of the things that are really exciting that are happening in the districts and use examples that we already have of excellence to train other teachers in other buildings. So, but yes, we should benchmark all these out.
Thanks.
Director Hayes.
You had mentioned 3 other districts that were comparable to us. Are they like same size or?
Pretty much, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All but one. One was small.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Susan.
Okay, so 2 about the same and 1 smaller.
It really isn't a size issue. It's more about infrastructure and policies and procedures and practices.
Okay, thanks. You've also mentioned on the next steps, redirect when necessary, and explain to me tying that into evaluations.
Well, when you have a strong infrastructure of accountability, then it would come into people's personnel evaluations. It would come into job descriptions. The expectations are everywhere as far as what teachers need to be doing, what principals need to be doing, all the way up and down the line, as we talked last week. There is not a professional development that the district does where we shouldn't be talking about particular practices that work best for all kids, that work best for kids of color, that work best for students low SES. We should always be differentiating different levels of supports for different subpopulations, regardless of what we're talking about, because that's how we're going to meet the needs of all kids.
Thank you.
Director DeSalvo.
You mentioned that about a school. If a school is being very successful, leave them alone, let them be. So I'm assuming tracking of this will be by school and then feed up the district level as well. So when we ask for this.
Yes, one of our national experts has given, Dr. Marquet Winston has given us a scorecard that she used very successfully in Cincinnati Public Schools and Chicago Public Schools. And we've been working with the associate superintendents and with the interim superintendent to see how we could use that so that we're constantly tracking data with principals. And then it would be like we would know routinely, weekly, bi-weekly, as far as who's slipping or who's really made an improvement, but that would all be based upon data.
So when we ask these questions, as you advise us to do, it should be at the school level and then feed into the district level.
And bring it up to the district level. And then when we look at district level concerns or celebrations, disaggregate it again so that we know who to praise or who to support.
And lessons learned.
And
I
lessons
think
learned,
that's very important
exactly.
that we have a lot of that synergy. So
exactly.
Thank you.
Anything else? Director Gosa, you have anything?
No.
All right, thank you. You know, I've got a couple of questions, and yet I got to tell you, I'm reluctant to ask any questions. I think that, you know, I wonder if I had something wrong to eat today or something. I've been a little bit obstinate, and I apologize for that in advance. But there are some questions, and you know that we got called asleep at the wheel because we weren't asking sufficient questions. And yet it feels like when we ask questions now, then it's almost like being admonished. I just want to let you sense that. So a year ago, we were cited by the department for disproportionality in 2 areas, the way I recall it. I don't have this stuff with me. But I believe that we weren't cited for lack of equity. And this equity issue comes up now, and when I read it there, on that page of next steps, equity shows up, but I don't think that there's any disproportionality that shows up. And I'll tell you, I'm just an average, simple citizen from our community that's trying to do the best job possible on this board. And I'm not a special ed expert. If the expectation is that we're going to Google all of this and find out and become experts, I think that's going to be a real challenge. And so Susan, I think you said in some of your opening remarks that this is one of our biggest issues. And I think you were talking about disproportionality. And yet it seems like now, and especially when I've tried to find out what is disproportionality, I've tried to find out from the Department of Ed. I have tried to find out from the Iowa Association of School Boards. And that has been one of the references that the department has given me for a long time. They've said, go to the IASB. And I've been to the CEO of the IASB, and she has said, don't really know what you're talking about. And so it's frustrating for me to get a recommendation to go to a conference that's next week that might help us. When just let me talk for a little bit. So in leadership positions and in the work that I do, when I'm asked to take a leadership position, I always got to try and figure out what's the problem. And I have asked for what are the root causes before, and root causes aren't data. You know, we talk about, well, we've got a lot of data. Yep. And we're going to go ahead and make decisions based on data, not based on what the root causes are. In my estimation, because we haven't even had that discussion. What are the root causes? So I've got a few more, but Sandy, you want to say something?
Yeah, a couple of things. As some of you may know and some of you may not, I spend a good part of October in buildings talking to teacher focus groups, leadership groups, students. I could give you root causes based upon qualitative data. I don't know that you want it in this forum, but I do have some qualitative data that I could share with you. Some of this is semantics. The reason why we talk about equity, because equity is positive, disproportionality is a negative term. And we are trying to build some energy around this and some positivity about, as Director Hayes said last week, building a system that cares for all kids. And so much of this is semantics, and as the first document that I showed you, talking about discipline disparities, is another word for disproportionality. It's another word for lack of equity. And so what we've been talking about as an administrative team is to change our language to make it positive, that we're building something positive rather than correcting something negative. But I could have changed all those words to disproportionality. It's in part semantics, I believe.
So you were at the meeting on November 14th where, if you want to talk about semantics, the State Board of Education, they weren't about anything positive in that meeting. And they were about all pure negative. And they hammered on the district, they hammered on the board, and they said some really nasty things about our district. And there was one of the board members there. Of course, one of the board members, and I won't go into all of the negative stuff, but it was clear that they had no, in spite of your and Amy's representations, they would not accept the possibility that this district could have this work done by April 23rd. And they summarily rejected that and then decided, even though you guys said, yeah, they can, they said, go on to phase 2. There were comments about this district. I think the words were something like, this is the worst ever in the history of Iowa education, something like that. And there is no other district that has disproportionality like this. So I take all that stuff to heart. I can't just blow it off. And so if we're going to lead, and if the board has responsibilities, I really want to understand what are the responsibilities, and I think that we should have some guidance from somewhere. I think that if I go to the department says go to the ISB says we don't have anything. I go to the state says we don't know what you're talking about. I'm talking about the legislature. And then if we can't ask questions, I'm sure that we will be called some sort of nasty name again when we go before the State Board of Education. So I think this is a real conundrum, and I don't have a clue, even with all of this stuff, what can we do? And I wrote a question here. I said, if you have a goal, because one of your slides said something about goals. And I said, how do you know the answer if you don't know the cause? And maybe it's just that I'm not an educator. And maybe in education you can do things different, and we can simply address the data instead of addressing the cause. I
would be happy to share the data that I have about root cause. As I said, I don't know that you want me to do it in this forum, but I would be happy to share those data. With all due respect, the November 14th board meeting was 5 months ago. And we have made a lot of progress since then, but not as much as we could have without more commitment and understanding of the issues that we need to tackle. And so I'm feeling a sense of urgency to get started in moving forward rather than if there's people who don't believe in other places, let's build on our own belief of the work that needs to be done and move forward. Because I think if we continue to have the discussion about other people don't understand disproportionality, other people can't define it, We understand it.
But the "we" is you, right? I told
Is
you
it,
that,
is it just,
no, it's
am I really
probably,
the only one?
I believe I must be the only person that doesn't have a good understanding of this. And I've been thinking about the best solution may be for me to just not participate, because I must be so ignorant and so naive. When I look at all this stuff, I still do not understand. At the last meeting, I was asking, what is the board responsibility? Because it sounds like the board has all this responsibility to look out in the future 5 years to hold the administration accountable for something that it they're just, the information isn't there. I'm willing to take the information, but I wish that I could get answers to my questions. And I'm just very frustrated with that part. I'll stop. I know I've been admonished by other board members to not bring this up, but that's the way I feel. And I probably will still be called names whenever we go to the state.
I think Director Beck has a
Well,
question.
wait a minute, Director Hayes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Director Hayes.
Sandy, help me with this, or anyone that can help me with this. I'm wondering if this equation is helpful. The root cause is basically the mindset. The mindset helps create the data. Would that be a fair assumption?
Yes. Typically, when you're dealing with conversations like this, the qualitative data, which are the numbers, are the indicator that there's a problem. Because it just can't be that far off as far as your demographics versus removals or whatever that we're talking about. So that will give you the who, what, when, where. So the where might be 3 buildings, or the where is certainly Davenport School District. The what would be the population of students. And we could dig deeper, as Shiraki Holly has said here before. Not all of your African American students are being removed. So then let's go down to another level. What's the other characteristic of your African American students that are being removed? So are all of your African American students with behavior problems being removed? No. So then let's go down to the next level. So you continue to slice and dice the data so that you can get very, very specific about what is the population of students that we're really talking about. We can't say African American students because it's not true of all African American students. So when you know the who, what, when, and the where, then what your root cause becomes the why. And so when I went out and talked, and the why, you really need to have, you can look at why as like, let's say that your procedure said, and this is ridiculous, but let's say that your procedure said that African American students must be removed at a higher level. I mean, that would be a document review, so to speak. We know that that's not the case, of course. That would be ridiculous. So the why comes more from talking to people and asking them, you've seen the data, why is that? Now, I've been told things that one person said to me, well, you've seen the school to prison pipeline. We're no different than any place else. That why would suggest a very negative mindset. And then there are others that would say, we're not sure what to be working on, things like that. So there's all kinds of things that come just from talking with people and getting the root cause as far as what's the mindset, what's the understanding, what's the attitude, those sorts of things.
Thank you.
Director Beck.
I guess I would just like to say that for me, it's not a matter of the words we use. If you look at the data, it's clear, even though people don't always follow a normal distribution, you still see a very different representation of students being suspended than, in different groups. And so to me, it doesn't really matter what we call it. That says that there's something maybe not quite right here, and that whether we get guidance or not, we should try to fix it. It'd be great to get guidance because we're not the experts. And so that's what I was trying to get at last week was, how do we go about this? And I know just from having tackled large institutional problems before, if you try and tackle it as a big whole, everyone freaks out and nothing ever gets done, and we just go around in circles talking about stuff. If you say, okay, what's one thing that we know that we can work on, and we set some goal about that. Now, we're not going to work on just one thing either, but we're not going to work on the whole problem. We're going to work on the little pieces. And I understand also that we're not going to get it right every time necessarily. We may find that we try something and it doesn't quite work, but we have to give it enough time. So I guess my personal perspective is that I don't really care what we call it. The data tell me that there's a problem and we should try and fix it, whether it's a problem in the nation or not.
And I would have to, with all due respect, I appreciate so much what you said, because some of it is semantics, and I can promise you that IASB is talking about disproportionality by talking about equity, because they're being positive. The other thing is your guidance from the Department of Education is standing in front of you.
Anything else? Director Gosa, do you have anything? I had one last question on the how close are we, and you showed some of it. What confidence do you have, Susan, that we're going to make it?
I have full confidence. We have 17 students left to meet on within district and a smattering of students outside of the district, and we have those scheduled. So it's just holding the meetings at this point. And remember, there are the kids that we have left had multiple citations attached to them. So they might have had functional behavioral assessment, behavior intervention plan, disproportionality, and removal, and predetermination and lack of individualization. So the list of 2,866 is the number of citations, with knowing that there was overlap with some of those.
And then just to clarify, so Sandy, does the department do a review and a report, and does that go to the state board? And how do they get notified that we did or did not complete?
Through me.
Huh?
Through me. And I'm doing an analysis of all of the data that I think you will find very interesting at some point, as far as the students who were awarded Comp Ed, who were they, for what, by race, by type of disability. We're going to try and disaggregate that for you as much as possible, because we want to learn from it, right? And so not only that we finished those kids, but we learned about our system and what we need to change as a result. And I'm really excited about that. The May board meeting is when I probably typically would have been. I will be presenting all of that to the Department of Ed, or giving it to them on April 23rd, which is the deadline. I'm not sure what the May meeting will look like, because that's when it's also anticipated that you will get your Phase 2 report. So I'm not sure what's going to all happen on that day, but I'll let you know as soon as I know.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. We'll move on to the transportation proposal.
So at our last meeting, it was a request to put together some more information for discussion at this meeting, and so Mr. Maloney is going to be here, but it was also requested that Durham be present to answer questions. So if you guys would like to come up here and sit at this table, position microphones to be able to answer. But Mr. Maloney is going to get us started with some of the information that's stated.
We have joining us here Lucy Kalkman, who's COO and Vice President for Durham Services. Curtis Wheeler, whom you know, is the General Manager of our account here in Davenport, and Elisa Hodges, who is the Regional Manager for this region. I came away from our discussion at the Committee of the Whole thinking that I must have failed to give you complete and clear information, as there was, I don't know how exactly that happened, but I thought it important to summarize a couple of things. One has to do with this redistribution of fixed costs, and those costs, those fixed costs, are in the contract underlying and are going to be paid regardless of how many routes or how many days there are. They are the fixed costs of operating, and when we reduce routes, we only eliminate the variable costs of operating. And I don't think I was sufficiently clear. And once we net out all of the route reductions that we have made, that was approximately a total of $841,000 in costs. 310 of those are fixed costs in this year. So the net reductions are projected to be a little over $531,000 from the reduction in the number of routes. So there is a savings, and it seemed like there was some confusion that, well, wait a minute, we've reduced routes and we've gone through all this grief and we're not even saving any money. And so I wanted to make that clear, and it's my responsibility to have made that clear in the first place, and evidently I didn't do that. So there is a projected savings from the reduction in routes. At the same time, I'm going to say that we've reduced routes, so now it's more and more difficult to stay on time, more and more difficult to deal with anything that comes up, because we have cut things down to the bare bones in order to maintain our current levels of service. And during this process, I included in your packet the bi-monthly report we get from Durham. It shows out-of-service events and speeding events and all of the data that's gathered, on-time performance and so forth. We haven't changed our performance indicators or our levels of expected performance, even though we've changed the numbers of routes. We still expect them to maintain their on-time performance, to maintain their in-service performance and so forth. The other thing I just wanted to repeat in the discussion about insourcing, that when our pension costs are 5.44% greater than Durham's pension costs, and our insurance costs are at least $2,500 per employee per year more than Durham's cost, and it's probably more than that. That's the only part I can tell for sure. And then if we add in the cost of our workers' compensation that we would have to pick up, it's upwards of $1 million a year of additional cost. There just isn't any savings predicted from in-house, bringing the service in-house. During the last contract renegotiation 3 years ago, I was able to negotiate an appendix to the contract that was an option for us to extend the existing contract for 3 additional years at the current rate or the previous rate of annual escalation, which was 2.75%. We got that in the contract as an appendix, as an option for us to take if we wanted to extend for 3 additional years. After the initial notification to Durham that it's time to talk about renewal and renegotiation, Ms. Kalkman provided me with a proposal based on current market conditions that was 7.5%, 3.75, 3.75 for the coming 3 years. And as I look around and talk with other districts, this is typical of what we're seeing in transportation contracts. But I said, now wait, we negotiated this option to renew for 3 additional years at 2.75%. And we reviewed the documents, and Ms. Kalkman agreed that yes, we had that on the table, and we'll honor that. Now, I compiled some data from the transportation cost in some of the other districts in the state that Durham is serving, and you see that before you, we have the lowest per route cost of any of the districts in the state that they're serving. And when we look at the average rate of all of those districts, we're substantially less. So the question was raised, can we go out for one additional year with Durham? And the answer to that, and then issue an RFP and test the market. The answer is yes. Durham is willing to do one additional year, but not at 2.75%. To do one additional year, they proposed that would need to be at 7% increase for the coming year. Now, I also went back and said, now with regard to this fixed overhead, the $310,000, and there's an additional amount for the reduction in the number of school days that we have done, because the basis of billing is number of routes per day. So if we reduce the number of routes, the fixed overhead is applied to fewer routes. If we reduce the number of days, the fixed overhead is applied to fewer days. So it's just division. And I said, is there any room for you to work on that? And she said, okay, if we renew for the 3-year at 2.75%, I will reduce the amount of the reduced days and routes by 6%. So that brings the 310 down to 254. And the rest of the math is here in your memo. So when I look at all of the data, and I look at the comparison of what we pay to other routes, and certainly when I consider the option that we negotiated 3 years ago for a 3-year extension at 2.75%, and then the last thing I'll say, we did look, Iowa City recently issued a request for proposals. Durham won that, and it's a 6.7% increase next year. So our rates currently are lower than everyone else, and we're 13.5% lower than the average of all of them. We have a very good record of service with Durham over the past, I don't know how many years, and I think we have a very good proposal for a 3-year renewal here that is, my judgment, is in the best interest of the district to consider the 3-year renewal at 2.75%. My regrets for not having been clearer in our last meeting, but I wanted to clarify some of those things for you, and I asked Ms. Kalkman and her team to be here if you wanted to ask any of them any questions directly. That you could do that, or if you have any additional questions for me, I will stop right there.
Director Beck.
One quick question. The rate comparison that you provided for us, those are all Durham?
Those are all Durham accounts.
Durham accounts. Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Director DeSalvo.
So part of that fixed cost is when we have the event that daily routes don't occur. This year was obviously an anomaly, and we had a horrible year with weather. However, I would like to point out that I recall having a discussion with Interim Superintendent Schneckloff about, he's like, Julie, we can't get the buses to start. It's below 0. We cannot have school because the buses are not starting. So does that count against us in our fixed costs when your buses don't start to run our routes?
We had, well, maybe Curtis can speak to that. We had nights when their staff stayed on site all night and kept buses running overnight in order that they would be available in the morning. And during the record cold, there were 2 or 3 days where that was more difficult, and some buses, Curtis can tell you the numbers better than I.
Yeah, on our coldest day, the -33, every bus we got started, we were there for about 32 hours straight getting buses started. I was there for 28 of those hours. The day that we didn't go, it was not because buses wouldn't start. It was a factor of us maybe going later, and it was a consideration there. But the reality of it was those temperatures were bitter. And I think there was more concern about the walkers. There was more concerns that day about students that drive themselves. And I think there was a big consideration that once we were running, it's one thing with a bus to get it running, but to keep it going without gelling with temperatures that cold, I think that was the other consideration with the buses. Would they start? Yeah. Would they stay running? It would have been a roll of the dice at that point. We weren't sure.
So again, I understand it's anomaly, but I would expect there would be something in there. If Davenport says, hey, you know what, it's Friday, we're just going to call it a day and everybody take the day off. Like, that's not going to happen. But the reasons we cancel school are weather related. Those are beyond our control. And it troubles me that they're held against us because of Mother Nature. Again, something detrimental beyond our control. That's a very familiar theme around here, but so many things beyond our control that, and this to me is one of them. I mean, I would at least hope there would be some sort of, okay, we'll allow, the average 2 days or something like that. And so, yeah, we had 7 days this year. Then we only assess the fee at 5, or I don't know what that figure would be, but it's troubling. Now, this was not a year to compare. I understand that. But we don't just call off school to call off school, and you don't just say, TJ, these buses are gelling up. We can get them on the road, but we can't keep them running. That's understandable, but it's frustrating. It's counted against us.
So ordinarily, we would make up the days that were canceled, and the number of days that routes were served would end up being the same. And this year, we extended minutes in the day and have fewer days, so we cut some routes. The other thing I wanted to mention, I have a brief mention of it in the memo there is a table of liquidated damages in the contract that, and I don't recall the numbers, but if you fail to operate on time this percent of the time, then you pay us money, we deduct money. If you fail to have the proper number of buses in service, then you pay us X dollars per day, etc. So there are some accountabilities built into the contract.
I think that's all I have right now.
Anything else? Director Potts.
I think up front, I'm in favor of the 3-year contract. But there are intangibles with the bus service. And I really wasn't cognizant of the intangibles that exist with the bus service until the letter you wrote responding to that parent about the bus that broke down on the way to, where was it, Des Moines or somewhere? Would you please explain how that breakdown was handled halfway to Des Moines or wherever it was on the interstate?
Yeah, so we had a group that we were taking to Iowa City for an event. And the bus, as they got off the interstate onto Dodge Street, driver recognized that there was black smoke coming out of the exhaust. We were losing power and made the safe decision to pull over to a safe location, notified me right away. I was able to get with one of our techs locally who can look up on the computer and see exactly what's going on with the bus, was able to get a code. I was able then to get a hold of one of our other locations, which is one of the benefits of us. If we have something like this happen, we've got resources throughout the entire state that we can go to. In that situation, I had a bus there that transferred those students within 15 minutes onto another bus and had them at their event on time. I had a mechanic there within 15 minutes from another location that was able to verify what we were seeing on the computer. And at the request of the coach, just for his peace of mind, he had requested a different bus, even though 2 mechanics, one on site and one looking at the computer, was able to determine that this bus is fine. We still drove that bus back to Davenport, picked up another bus, went back to Iowa City, and were able to grab that group when their event was over and bring them home safely.
That's what I mean about the intangibles, that you can get a hold of a mechanic halfway across the state. And if you imagine in the wintertime when a ball team is going someplace. And that had never occurred to me. That never occurred to me. That is, I guess, a fringe benefit of being with a company, as opposed to if we were running our own bus service, they would have sat there until somebody from here got there.
If I may respond to that, I did. Yes, we serve 20 contracts across the state of Iowa, so we do have locations across Iowa and out of state. And in the midst of the winter storm, the winter weather, I did have one of my school districts that sent 11 buses to Minnesota We had advised them not to go. All 11 buses got stuck up there. And they were stuck there for 4 days. And, the district called me in a bit of a panic because when you don't have 11 buses, you run the risk of not being able to have school. But we were able to find buses and drivers within 20 minutes of that school district, and we got them to school and got them home for 2 days straight while those 11 buses were up in Minnesota. So we certainly work as a team across Iowa and are willing to help out wherever we're needed to.
Because the moral is don't go to Minnesota.
Any other discussion? Director Gosa, you have anything?
Yes, I do. I'll let everybody get tensed up before I ask my question because I'm sure you all are. Again, I'm speaking for myself as one of 7. Honestly, the way that the numbers change all the time, I don't feel that I get accurate enough information. And Mr. Maloney, I know you had said you weren't able to answer some of the questions at the last meeting, but that's your job. That's what we pay you to be able to answer those questions. You were probably coached by Durham to be able to answer the stuff you had tonight. I'm very disappointed in that.
Excuse
I
me.
think
Hey, Director Gosa.
I'm just saying I want to have more accountability. That's what I was going to get at. The other thing is I'm good just to do the 1-year contract. I don't know why we would need to pay a higher percentage for that. If they want to prove themselves, it shouldn't be that big of a deal. I've expressed my frustration with this stuff. It's getting very old and very costly. I just want some accountability and stuff to get done right. And I'm going to quit now before I get myself in trouble, Mr. President.
I serve Davenport Community School District only, and I have done so with fidelity for 5 years.
Anything else? Director Beck.
Just thinking in terms of the number of routes that we reduced to, you said there's essentially no wiggle room and we're having trouble with on-time performance and things like that. Do we have a time frame for reevaluating the reduction in routes and potentially adding 1 or 2 back? Have we talked about that?
We meet quarterly. Rob, Bill, TJ, myself, a few others, Curtis, Beth, our router, and we review transportation operations and how routing's going. Now, I want to be clear, I said it's more difficult to maintain on-time performance, but we still are maintaining on-time performance. And Beth will call me and say, I'm really having trouble with this route. I may need to make some adjustments. We moved some kids around between a couple of the buses last week in order to, well, that was more kids not getting along with one another problem. But we make adjustments in routes or the number of stops on this route, maybe change them to another route. That's a constant analysis. There is a GPS software. There's GPS on all the buses. Matter of fact, I have a parent who complained that the bus is not on time. The bus is not on time. I'm out there with my kid. The bus is not on time. We can get the GPS record. And in this case, it's no, Mom, I'm sorry. You weren't on time. The bus was there.
Okay, so I guess I don't know if you did the math or if anybody's done the math, but so basically our options right now are a 3-year renewal at, 2.75% per year. And then if we wanted just 1 year, 7%. Okay. Has anyone done the math to know the dollar amount increase that would be?
Yes, I have that for you. So in year one, it would be $183,000 increase. In year two, it'd be $188,000 increase. In year three, it'd be $193,000 increase for the 3 years at the 2.75, 2.75,
Okay.
2.75.
Okay, and then 1 year at 7%, do we know approximately how much that would be? Sorry, I just
A
can't
little
do
more
the
than
math right now.
twice.
What?
A little more than twice the first
A
year.
little more than twice the first year amount?
Yeah.
400, okay, thank you. Yep.
In addition, I suspect that years 2 and 3 would be greater than 2.75%, current market conditions.
And I've probably asked this before, but I just want to hear it again and clarify. What is the turnover rate for drivers in Davenport? And are most of them from the community and stay in the community, or vested in the community?
Yeah, we've had consistently less than 10% turnover. Our retention rate is higher than pretty much any other location in our central region. I can't speak highly enough about our drivers and monitors and what a partnership they feel with this community and with this district. They like being here. They like working here. They are all local folks. A lot of them have their children riding buses. And they're heavily involved with the community. I mean, you've seen in the PowerPoint, we've done everything from, adopting families at Christmas time to the fire for the Buchanan family. I can't even tell you their name. And we filled that place and gave a decent amount of money to help them out. We do the Toys for Tot drives. We do the Stuff the Bus. I mean, they love being a part of this and really feel like they're a partner in it.
Thank you.
Director DeSalvo.
Mr. Maloney, on your chart, so you're saying the rate per route is $287.06?
Yes.
And then over on the chart to the right, there's the last column, it says Davenport regular ed routes at other district rates. What's that calculation?
If we ran the same 81 routes for 178 days at the cost in the other districts, it would yield the amount shown on the right, and you can compare that to the 287 times the same numbers to what it actually yields for Davenport to show what our difference in cost would be if our daily rate per route was the same as other districts in this market.
Do we have 94 routes right now? This says 81.
81 regular ed routes.
Okay.
90.
So the 94 total include others.
It doesn't include special ed. It's just regular ed.
Okay. All right, that answers my question. Thank you.
Did you have more? Director DeSalvo?
No, I'm good. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
All right. Anybody else? I got just a few little questions. The 7%, that applies to both variable and fixed?
That would be total increase to the district, 7%. So yes.
Who's the biggest school bus service in Iowa?
I don't know the market share. First Student and Durham are the big ones. I don't know each one's market share.
Okay.
We formerly had First Student.
Right.
I was just going to say that Durham is probably the most prevalent here in Iowa. First Student, I don't even believe.
First Student is not in the state anymore that I'm aware of. They lost all their contracts.
Do you know how many districts you serve in Iowa?
Yeah.
20. No.
Some locations we operate numerous districts.
12. So it's a very small percent of the school districts in Iowa.
All the ones are listed on the sheet, and they're some of the largest ones in the state.
I understand. I'm just saying that as a percent of districts, it's a very small number. there are 330 districts in the state, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't know the makeup of who's self-ops and who's contracts, so I don't know how many are contracted, some are
No,
in-house.
I understand, but if you and First Student are, or if you're the primary service provider, then yeah, there might be a few little companies
Right.
out there, but probably what it suggests is that most districts must be providing their own busing. Seems like a reasonable assumption to me. You look stunned. Is that
Who are the major competitors here?
The only competitors I'm aware of at this point are Student Transportation of America.
okay? Oh, okay, because one of the questions I had was all of the comparisons were done compared to Durham. And so it's kind of hard to figure out if there's no other comparison. The only other thing that I wanted to ask about is apparently there's a method if Durham does not, in the contract, if they do not comply with on time, whatever that means. And I imagine there's a lot of trying to figure out what that means. Is there any, so, and that's a damages issue. So if they're late, then they pay some amount of money, right? And I thought at one of the previous meetings, you said it was a significant amount.
Why don't, when we present a contract for your consideration, I'll include in the summary, we'll call out particular attention to that table of what the liquidated damages are for different kinds of events, and what precisely the performance indicators are on time, for what the requirements are, so you can know exactly what level of on-time performance is required, what level of in-service buses is required, what the cost is for not meeting the KPI.
And-
We'll, I don't know it off the top of my head, but we'll call attention to it so you can consider it.
And maybe if you're going to do that, if you could give us a historical perspective, how have things been for the past year? My biggest concern is still getting the kids to school on time. And it isn't the damages, you know, so what, they pay us $1,000, but we lost 50 hours of student time because they were late. So if we could do that, and then I was just, and I do not want to get into the weeds on a contract, but I just wondered if there's a way to look at it as a bonus instead of as damages. Is that ever
If there's a way to look at it,
where they would receive a bonus instead of damages if they're on time?
I don't know why you could not have both. I don't know why you could not have both.
Right.
And if buses are late, it's a rare enough occasion. If the bus is late, the principal calls me.
Okay.
Mr. Potts knows this.
I have one more. I apologize. I forgot I didn't circle this question. So you and the superintendent make the decision on whether or not to call school off or to delay. Is that correct?
Yes, and we ordinarily, Curtis and I drive roads and consult. We may talk with the county road department and public works. Then we call superintendent, we get a conference call with other superintendents. We try to all get our act together so that all the districts are thinking the same thing to the extent possible.
I don't know why that's important, and that may not be part of this question. I always figure that Davenport can figure out whether the buses should run without asking Bettendorf if they're going to run or not.
And we sometimes differ because we have a large rural area that we serve that PV and Bettendorf don't have. So we all want to know what the other guy's doing, but they don't make our decision because we have different circumstances.
How much influence does Durham have during these types of situations? If Curtis is out looking at the roads too, and making recommendations to you and the superintendent, how much influence is there?
Curtis
It's
plays a part
ultimately
in.
my recommendation
Hold
to
on a second.
superintendent.
Curtis plays a part in that because obviously we need to know if the buses are running or not. But that decision ultimately lies between Mr. Maloney, Rob, and Bill and myself. So there were times where we directed, no, get it going, we're going, and so I would. That's the piece that I would chime in on, and that portion of it operate. That was very trying this winter, and I appreciate everybody's efforts and energies, and that decision lies right here.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other discussion? All right, thank you very much for the
one quick
discussion.
question.
What? Oh, Director Beck.
It's probably not that relevant to this conversation, but I was just kind of looking around and I noticed that some students have a parent reimbursement form if they are non-public students that ride on our routes. And incidentally, do all these routes, these are just the district schools, correct?
No, we serve the parochial schools
I know,
as well.
do these count, does this whole thing count those as well?
Yes, these routes are part of the routes.
Okay. And do we do parent reimbursement for those students, or do we just we pay for it, the state reimburses us for those students?
Mr. Scott, are you up to speed on that?
There's a little bit of both. If the parent is transporting their own student, because we don't have a route that can accommodate them, then they file for reimbursement from us. We get reimbursed from the state, the non-public parent. Yeah.
Okay. And we get reimbursed from the state?
Yes.
Okay, but otherwise, if they're on a route, they don't file for parent reimbursement, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
All right, very good. I think we'll move on. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Okay, we have one additional discussion item, additional parking at JB Young.
This item has been in the works for a while and has been bumped up on our list to have the board discuss for a couple of reasons. One, during the week we have quite a bit of traffic due to some of the businesses and entities on the first level floor, but also we are getting ready to add special education department back into this building for unification purposes. And so what Mr. Maloney is going to present now is our proposal to help expand the parking in this area. Also, to think about this place as a community place, we save a lot of money by having this space right here. We don't have to rent facilities anymore because this is plenty big to have huge trainings in here. And now that this has been placed on casters, we can actually hold more training. Well, that puts our neighbors in a big bind when we train. As you guys have witnessed trying to park here, you have to go over to Aldi. Well, Aldi's isn't like that anymore. So those are the kinds of things that we're running into with this area. So Mr. Maloney has a presentation for some additional parking here.
We have, Eric has worked with one of our civil engineering firms to come up with conceptual drawings only. We don't have plans. This is just a simple concept of two areas where we would be able to add additional parking. One is right outside our front door, which we could add 5 ADA and 20 regular spaces for an estimated little less than 90,000. The other would be to take up about half of the playground area on the south side of the building. We could get 24 additional spaces there, and that would be a little less than 50,000. If we did both, of course, it would be about 140,000. That would be over 130, and that would require public notice and a public hearing and that sort of thing. So it would take us a little time to get that going. We will be adding about 20 staff, a little bit fewer, I think, than 20 by moving our special education folks into this building. So that will add to the parking load. And now that we can move the dais around, we're able to add about 30 more people to this training space than we were previously able to fit here. Those of you who were on the board when the decision was made may recall we initially proposed more parking than we currently have. The Hilltop campus folks asked that we preserve more green space and park area here, and we did that. And now that we've been in the building for more than a year, we find that parking is too tight. Not a part of this conversation, but I'll mention now that the Main Street Wells Fargo branch has announced that it's closing, it may be possible for us to buy that little tiny parking lot and the adjacent undeveloped lot next to our basketball courts from them. I'd suggest first consider the additional parking we're proposing today, and then if we find we need more, maybe we could talk to the bank later. If there are any questions about the particulars here, Eric knows exactly what's proposed, and I'd be happy to respond to anything I can.
Okay, thank you. Director Beck.
Just at a first glance, though, I like the idea of costing only $50,000. I don't like the idea of removing playground equipment and potential neighborhood recreational space, as well as trees and bushes, because there's already a paucity of trees in the world. So I guess I'd be inclined to reconfigure the front. The first picture you have there, if we're going to go with one of these two proposals. Just wanted to put that out there.
Eric, I don't believe that the playground one, those street trees would remain. I don't believe those get affected.
Okay, okay, well, that's good. It just said remove trees or bushes or some on the corner there, so. But I like the idea of having the playground there if it's used by neighborhood people. I think that's important, and I think that was one of the things, if I remember correctly, that people wanted preserved was the sense of neighborhood use, and so playground, basketball.
Yeah, we would reorient the basketball courts, but we could retain a basketball court. The play structure that's there is damaged and the repair parts are no longer available. So we have been discussing taking that out for some while.
Okay, well, that's
just because
a
of
little
that.
different. All right, okay.
Director Potts.
Aren't those trees ash trees?
Could be. I don't know the answer to that.
I think they're ash trees.
So they may be ephemeral.
Director DeSalvo.
Having been a victim of being unable to find a space here many times, I would actually be in favor of both. I think that would give us the long-term need.
Yes, I think with the additional staff that would be our recommendation.
Plus, I'm hoping our folks downstairs on the first floor continue to grow. And I know especially on food pantry night, it's difficult. It's incredibly difficult to find space for those people. And so I think this would help them as well. So I would like to be considerate of those folks down there that need the space too. So I would be in favor of both.
In spite of the challenges that the food bank presents, Mr. Border's presentation at the last meeting, I think, is evidence of how important it is to this community.
Director Hayes.
I too would be in favor of both of them. We had a meeting, actually we've had a couple meetings on Tuesday where it was almost impossible to find parking, and I was one that went over to Aldi's because we couldn't find places. But those 5 spaces over by right here in the front that were going to be added, that would be something that I would also be in favor to reserve those for us on Monday and Tuesday. So we're not, having to go quite a ways to get parking. So yes, I would support them both.
Anything else? Oh, Director Gosa.
I'm trying to remember earlier, how many FTE are coming out of the ASC with the new cuts?
22.
But you're adding, right? Because you're moving, bringing special ed back in.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. It'll even out. That was my point. Yeah, I know, and they wanted the bigger parking space in the beginning, and we didn't give it to them. Now they're going to get it on the back end. I get that. I would be in favor of waiting and see what the bank does because there's already a parking lot there.
Okay. Anything else? So, a few years ago, we had a big problem with use of that equipment, correct, by the neighborhood. I mean, I remember board meetings where it was, they weren't quite fighting with each other, but it was a big bad deal. And actually, I can't recall. I know that Clyde was, and I don't know if it was before or after he was on the board, but he was really opposed because he said that we had agreed way back when, years ago, to the trees issue, and then the neighborhood apparently was causing just horrific problems on, I think that's Harrison over there, if I recall right. Do you know, because then I think Superintendent Tate made a policy that we were going to lock the gates or pull the basketball hoops down or something. I don't know where that ever went. But
I can refer your memory. I can recall. So what happened is Director Mayfield asked that those hoops be removed because they were causing so much trouble for his business across the street that he wanted them removed. So the hoops were removed. The equipment itself was not, but it was because of his request, because of his business and the top of
Okay. Thank you. Director Gosa said wait until after the bank makes decisions. Do you know when that's going to happen?
I do not. I spoke with the bank a couple of years ago about acquiring the vacant lot, not the parking lot. There's a small vacant lot about the same size as their parking lot next to it, and they were not interested in selling. Now that the branch is being closed, I can contact their real estate folks and see if they're interested in selling now. There is perhaps, I don't know, 10 or 12 spots there. It's not enough to meet our full needs. It's just enough to help.
What's the sense of urgency on the whole thing?
If you would like to have this done by the time school starts next year, we would need a vote tonight. We have to issue public notice, schedule a public hearing, get plans and specifications done, bidding done, and award a bid in time to build in July. So, you know, there is a sense of if you would like to see this done by the time we move our additional staff in, which is supposed to be the 1st of July, that we need to get a decision underway because of the procedural requirements for public notice, public hearing, and so forth.
All right. When's the next board meeting?
2 weeks. 2 weeks.
All right. Well, why don't we think on it a little bit? You've got a wide variety of board perspectives here, so I don't think there's a consensus right now. Okay. Anything else? Director Beck.
I was just going to say, it does seem like most of us are in favor of adding parking. So if we wanted to have them prepare more specific ideas for 2 weeks from now.
Right, and that's probably what will happen, but they will make a specific recommendation, and then it'll be up to the board to figure out if you want to do it. There have been at least 3 different suggestions here, so. Okay, very good. Thank you, guys.
We should build a parking garage.
Is there there's no other additional discussion items? I think we can go to the administrative reports. And I have no board requests. Is that correct? Okay, so I would accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
This meeting is adjourned.